Chris DeBoard here for the Dirt Drop, taking a chance to be able to thank our sponsors for making this program possible. First, we do want to shout out Stage Wheels. Bill over at Stage is kind enough to be able to provide the Dirt Drop with not only support for the Toolworks racing program, the Dirt Drop podcast, but also has a discount code for anyone who wants to be able to purchase products on their website. Make sure to check out the description in this video for the code, the Dirt Drop, to be able to add for a discount on your next order. They ship wheels and merchandise out of Richmond, Virginia. You can find them on Facebook and Instagram at Stage Wheels and also on their website, www.stagewheelsna.com. Next, we want to be able to thank Velocita USA out of North Carolina for all of their support they do, again, for the Toolworks Racing program and the Dirt Drop podcast. They offer racing equipment from head to toe for all your safety apparel, custom pit t-shirts, and so much more. Make sure to check them out at velocita-usa.com or on their social medias, Velocita USA, Facebook, and Instagram. When you go to order, make sure to use the code TDD10, that's TDD10, for 10% off all Velocita branded products on their website. Last but certainly not least, wrapped in our Stage Wheels is Zek Nova Tires. Thank you to Luis Lands out of Florida with distribution in Chicago, greater metro area, and Toolworks also does support in the Richmond and Mid-Atlantic area for distribution as well. If you have any questions about the products Zek Nova offers, be able to check them out as well. Zek Nova US on Facebook and Instagram, as well as www.zeknovaus.com. Now let's get into our show. What is going on, Dirt Drop viewers? Price check on prune juice. We are another episode of the Dirt Drop podcast. I am your host, Chris DeBoard, and boy, do we have a special treat for you, boys and girls. My guest today is not just a local celebrity, but he's a national celebrity for all the right reasons and does way more than anyone really kind of understands. We're talking about the head of USDrift here in the Mid-Atlantic region. He is a Formula Drift Pro and Pro Spec judge. He also works with Ferrari, the prancing pony from Italy, in all sorts of capacities. I want to be able to give a shout out to the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Brian Eggert. Sir, welcome to the podcast.
Man, if it wasn't for that prune juice joke, I thought you'd pick somebody else besides me. Everything else had me confused there for a second.
Make me sound good. Keep them guessing.
Yeah,
you got to keep them guessing, man. I hate to say it, but the phrase older than dirt doesn't really apply anymore when we can start saying older than drifting in the U.S.
Yeah.
And I think that goes without saying. You're one of them, right?
Yeah, I'm old.
All right. So, okay. Old is one thing, experience is another. Can you kind of give us the deep dive in your connections to grassroots drifting? How'd you get involved with it? What got you going in it? And what made you want to keep progressing to really be at the point where you're at now?
Yeah. I grew up in Virginia Beach, and we were into cars and stuff then. I started out getting into lowrider trucks, and then got into, I don't know anybody who remembers the Super Touring series they used to have. It had like Honda Accords from the mid-90s, had Dodge Stratus, and they were just slammed four-door cars with aero. They looked amazing. So that really got me into the import cars. So jumped from mini trucks to that. And then about 98, my buddy Mike Snyder, who you know, who helps do all the events, he got himself A86 because he'd been watching videos from Japan on downloading them and VHS and everything else. And he pretty much is the one that started all of us getting into drifting. And so he bought this pristine one this guy had that he would put a car cover on every day at work. I mean, it was mint. And so finally, when he was parting with it, Mike bought it, and he used to put it in a car cover and everything for a while. Fast forward a few years later, then he ends up wrecking that thing at Lowe's Motor Speedway into the wall, gets two wheels off. That guy would probably cry if he knew the shape that car's in now. But originally, it was gorgeous, one of the nicest 8.6s you could see. And so Mike still has that car to this day, which is amazing because he's probably going on, 26, 27 years? Same car. So Mike got us introduced to drifting. I looked around for a while, found a barn find Corolla in North Carolina, $400, bought it, got it back, started cleaning it up, had lots of rust and issues. So then there was a friend of mine named Jerry who lived in Raleigh, and there was a girl that he had passed a bunch of times who had another silver and black Corolla, and he kept trying to get her to sell it. She wouldn't sell it to him. Well, my buddy Mike was dating a girl who knew that girl pretty well, and he convinced her to sell it to me. And so I went down and picked it up, and he was pissed that I got it before he did. sold my other one to our other friend who I think still has that original Corolla of mine. And then I had that one for a while. Then we were going to like, obviously now you wouldn't do it, but we were going back to like industrial parks in Raleigh, Durham,
Yeah.
down in Chesapeake, Suffolk areas, down in Tidewater, and we would just go drifting illegally. There wasn't any place to do it, so we'd find industrial park. They're dead on the weekends, and we would just go have fun there. Then all of a sudden,
What? So hold on a second. I don't want to cut you off too much. I
yeah,
want to
you're
give
good.
like a spatial. I want to give a spatial awareness to our viewers of the time frame we're talking. Like, what is
So,
this? Like 0002?
I got my Corolla in '99, and then the second one I think was like 2000, and then this was about 2001. Like we'd been doing this for about 3 years now. Then all of a
Okay.
sudden we find out about this event called Hyperfest that's happening at Summit Point, and it was
What?
2002. And we're like, okay, this sounds fun, and they're gonna have drifting, and they did it on the main course. And I mean, for anybody who's older wants to look for it, the Signal Auto Corolla was there. One of the guys brought it out. I mean, uh, it was so long ago. Gosh, just the drifting. If you look at videos and watch videos and photos from there, it's just night and day from what it is now. But everyone was stoked on it. I actually missed the very first one. It's the only one I've ever missed. I had to work, but Mike and Jerry and all these guys went to that. And Jerry had gotten rid of. He had a little coupe. I think Corolla or 240, and then he got his Lexus IS 300. It was a wagon, one of the first, and he took it out and drifted it at that event at Summit, and that was funny. And then after the event, Chris Cabetto, who runs the NASA Mid Atlantic and Hyperfest, was like, "Hey, you guys like drifting? I brought it in to get younger people into road racing, but you guys seem to really like it. I don't have the time or the patience to deal with it, but if you guys want to start doing it legally, we'll teach you how to throw events." And so he helped us and guided us and basically said, "Here, US Drift is yours. The only stipulation is you got to help us work Hyperfest every year." So since then, I've done every Hyperfest, which now we're on 23, I think. So
So he approached you in '02, and that was the creation of really the separation of US Drift from Hyperfest, and then the origination of what we know US Drift now as.
yeah,
Correct?
yep. So Chris and them did it, and actually, I think either the first year, I know they did the one at Hyperfest. The second year, I didn't help out do the other ones, but they actually did a multi-tour thing, kind of like some festivals do now, where they went to Cal Speedway, they went to Sonoma, which back then was Infineon.
Mm-hmm.
We did events at Lowe's Motor Speedway, which is now in Charlotte. So like
Mm-hmm.
we did those for about 2 or 3 years. We did Beaver Run. Now it's called Pit Race.
Oh.
So like way back in the forum days of like shoot, I'm trying to think of someone. We had our own lookout forum back then, but then there was also sometimes
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. Like Matt Martin, for those who might remember him. I had been talking with Matt for probably a solid year before I actually met him in person, and we met at Beaver Run's Hyperfest, and we went out there, and I probably got some old pictures and stuff of our cars there. I mean, we drove 7 hours, no trailers. If we wrecked a car, I was planning on just stripping it and leaving it there. Like that's how we did it back then. Nobody had tow vehicles and trailers like people do now, which is so nice. So yeah, I brought my Corolla out there. Mike Snyder brought his. Matt Martin was in a maroon 240. So yeah, we were there, hung out. Jerry drove up in a little white 8.6 coupe and had no heat or anything, and drove all the way up from Raleigh. And his girlfriend was so mad because she was like in a blanket the whole drive. I don't think there was a radio or anything. We had brought a keg in the back and had the settings way too stiff in the car, so the keg couldn't even be open for like 24 hours. Just it was a mess, but we all had a blast, and that's kind of what kicked it off. We gradually started doing more events locally, like at mall parking lots in Richmond. We did them at Cloverleaf Mall, for those who remember. We used to do them at VMP.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been doing to that drag strip for 22, 23 years now too. So it's been ages we've been going there. They became an NHRA track for a couple seasons and wouldn't let us do it. So there was like a little hiatus in the middle of about a decade, but that's our longest venue we've been going to outside of, well, we don't go to Summit that often now. So yeah, I'd say that's our longest venue. So then fast forward like a year or two after, I guess it was a year after Hyperfest. Our friend Tony Schultz, who also came up to Hyperfest and lived down in Atlanta, he competed in FD for a couple of years, and now he judges for some other little series that are grassroots, and he still has a Corolla and a 240. So he went and did test drives on the S's at Road Atlanta, and this was probably 2002, I'd say in the fall. And then Jim and Ryan from FD were going out to the track, and Tony calls and said, "Hey, they want to get some drivers to come down and test out Road Atlanta. They're thinking about doing a drift event here." And we were like, "Okay, cool. What's it get?" And they're like, "You get a free hotel room. That's it." And we were like, "Cool, deal, perfect."
Awesome.
Yeah, because back then it's like, oh, we get to drive Road Atlanta. I mean, nobody had drifted Road Atlanta except for Tony, who did the S's, and that video is still around. I've seen it. If not, I've got it on a hard drive. But I mean, he was booking in this car, and I think it was like an SR20 S14 he had, and he was doing the backside S's, and we come down, and it was Jerry in a black 240. I think that his was SR. Snyder came down in his Corolla. I rode with him. Ben Schwartz came up from Florida in a 240. For those who remember him, he used to spot for Kengushi. And then we had Tony. So it was 4 of them driving. And I'm out there with a camera I borrowed from Collins' dad that was SLR, and it was film. That's how long ago this was. And so I'm out there shooting, and it's like January, it's probably like January 13th. So almost exactly however many years ago to the day. We're a week off from it. And I've got the pictures on Facebook. I mean, they're bad. There's no loop paved in yet. So all we're doing is bombing the hill, coming up, switching, going up to the bridge, turning around, coming back down. So we have fun there. Mike burns up his fuel pump that day, and then the track's like, all right, we got to close. It's the end of the day. So they flat tow him out the gate, and they're like, see you later, and they just leave. And then we're like, damn. So Jerry takes his car, goes, finds it. And at this time, those who've gone to Roto in and out, there was nothing back then. You had Panaz out front. You had BBS like 2 blocks away. And then you had one hotel, I think either at the exit that you get off now, or it was like one exit up. There was nothing in between the interstate and the track. Empty. And so we had to go a ways, get a fuel pump, come back, change it in the parking lot. And then we went to the hotel, spent the night, and then drove back the next day. And that was it. And then 2-3 weeks go by maybe, and I think I get a call from either Jim or Ryan, and they're like, hey, we saw you out there with a camera. Do you happen to have that film? Could we see the pictures? And so I had to get them scanned in and everything, or even back then, I don't even know if I scanned them in yet. I think I printed them and just mailed them the pictures of the track so they could see it. And then a few months later, we find out, oh, they're adding a loop in. And we're like, oh, this is cool. So then FD is born, and we're all stoked on it. And Nate Braz drove in it in the beginning. Simmons, who was one of our drivers, Matt Martin drove in it. And we tried to help him out a little bit that we could back then. Jerry later drove for them. So when he had done this stuff in the IS300, Team Lexus a few years later gets into drifting. Matt's crewing for them, doing road racing stuff. And then they go through a couple drivers, and then he had driven one before, so they throw him in the car. Problem was they kept jumping back and forth between the setups, between road race and grip. And so it would never get remembered what happened, road race and drift. And so they never really took the notes for it. So every event, he was constantly having to get the car back to the way it was previously. So he did a few rounds of that in their IS300, and then he quit. So a lot of people don't even know he drove.
I want to interject here because I think I know the car you're talking about. Was it the orange one with the blue lettering?
Yes, and apparently somebody still has it and drifts it somewhere around here now.
Yes. Yeah, well, it's a shell, I believe, that's like past like 13. Like this thing has gone around more than the high school cheerleader. I mean, she's, visited all the homes in New Jersey, Pennsylvania. But no, I want to go circle back real quick before we go to this thing. So recently you talked about media right there real quick.
Yeah.
You couldn't just put it on Facebook. You couldn't put it on a reel. You couldn't show that stuff. Tony's drift initiation in the S's was 20 years plus or minus to the month of Matt Kaufman's 18-year initiation at Laguna Seca. And I don't think a lot of people took that correlation seriously, but if you can see Matt Kaufman at Laguna Seca, that's, I believe, just as serious as what Tony did in Atlanta. Would you agree?
Probably. I mean, when Tony did that, we were on forums and we were all losing our mind. And I mean, the quality of the video was horrible, but that was a big thing then because here is one of the top probably 5 or 6 tracks in the country, and we were allowed to drift on it that early in the sport, which was cool. Similar thing happened at VIR. So VIR used to be open back in the 50s, 60s, road racing, shut down, I think, in the late 70s, became farmland for 20 years. Harvey Siegel, a real estate developer from New York, was having meals with people or something at dinner and kind of made a joke like, hey, I could turn a racetrack into a country club resort. And the guys, they were like, no, you can't do it. So he's like, okay, cool, I'm doing it. And Connie, the lady who runs it now, was working with him, and they ended up buying the land back, building the racetrack, and it was really the first country club motorsport facility around the country. Now you have Thermal, you have Monticello, you have a bunch of them that are popping up now. But they were the ones who pioneered it, so VIR was the first one to come back as that. They added the Patriot course. It wasn't there originally when they built the racetrack. So that opened up around 2001, 2002. Snyder and them were there. I couldn't go, but he had his Corolla and stuff, and they were drifting. There was an SCCA race that weekend, and people hadn't seen drifting that much then because it was still new. So the media guys started coming over and shooting the Patriot course drifting. Randy Potes was there racing. I think he borrowed a Crown Vic, and then he came over and started drifting the Crown Vic around the drift course. And then all of a sudden, the SCCA people were getting mad because all the attention was on the drifting. And so they told them all, I can't remember what the threat was, but they basically threatened them and said, you wouldn't be able to shoot our event if you don't come back and start shooting and stop shooting the drifting. So then they all had to like go back and shoot the road racing. But everybody wanted to see the drifting. And that's when they're like, this is going to stick around and be awesome. And so
to be able to have Randy Popes in a Crown Vic throwing stuff around 20 plus years ago, and that's part of like the origination of our sport, is really, I mean, that's a milestone moment in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's a shame that like I could probably find some stills of, but I don't think there's any video. A lot of the video we had from back then we've lost because most of it was just getting dumped on forums, and then they died, lose the hard drives. I had a couple where I've tried to pull back old footage, and I do have some old content from those, but a lot of it got lost, and that's a bummer because there's some cool stuff that we had back then. New generation has it easy.
Yo, you're not telling me anything I don't know. I think if we stuff like this, I want to be able to try to use as a platform to really kind of get some people like who are from the OG generation be like, man, I need to go check my high 8 tape or my camcorder or my you know what I'm saying? Like, oh man, I think I got some footage from that event in 05. Like that's important. That's chronicle.
And we've toyed around with the idea for like the last year or two, like we should do like a senior citizen event or something and say, hey, if you can prove you've driven with us like 20 years ago, maybe even 15, and you can provide footage or photos, then we'll let you drive for free that event. And it'll be like a seniors event or something. Because a lot of these guys still have their old cars from back in the day, which is crazy. I mean, I know John Wagner still has his 240. We've been trying to get him to come out in the mountain with it. But I mean, we did get D'Alessio to come out. He still had his 240. I mean, there's a lot of guys that still have their old cars. They never sold them. And kudos to that. Mike Snyder, he still has his Corolla. So there's a lot of guys that still have those. Charlie Tyson still got some of his old cars.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, Charlie's got a bunch of cars. He's probably got...
Well, I know that.
He's got a bunch of Corollas, but he's still got some of his original ones. I mean, it's in pieces, but they still got them. So I'm hoping some of these guys come back and...
You're talking like what, an 03 originator of like one of the first mainstream like hardcore Corolla drifters. Charlie would definitely be up there. Same with Clayton Ashby. You know, the Rising Sun was, you know, what, 07 maybe? 08?
Yeah, because he came in when we were doing events at ODS. So so we kept doing our events for a year or two, and then we noticed there was such a big gap from bringing the newer guys into FD. So back then you had Naoki Kobayashi doing Drift Association with a couple of the guys in California. Then you had Southeast Drift Association popped up. You had Daily Drifter down in Texas with John Yim, who used to drive an FD. He's also a Corolla guy who still has his Corolla. You might know it as the old F1, I'm forgetting what it is now. It's the special, the cigarettes, the black and gold. He does one, it's called the John Yim Special, but that's his Corolla, what it used to look like.
Like the Lotus cars.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes.
So, so he's been around for ages. He was doing events. Then you had Vegas Drift pop up. The guys at Club FR were there. So, like, we all met together, and then we kind of kicked this idea to FD, like, we should do a feeder series. Like, just having amateur guys that just say, I want to drive an FD and do it. Like, it worked back in the day. I remember Forsberg came and drove. He was driving E-Town and everything for a while. Then he had the 350 Z convertible. Came and did our event at Lowe's Motor Speedway, and then took his Dodge Dewey, I think back then, and just drove cross country. And then he moved out there and just drove FD after that, like nonstop. Moved out there and everything. JR, I remember, would tow his back and forth, which kudos to him. He actually stayed local and was able to make it happen, which is kind of cool. He still had a real job for a while. I mean, he just hustled. But back on it, I forgot where I was going with it.
Talk about progression, like with me, the OG Corolla guys.
We got the Pro-Am started, and FD did it, and we were all part of it, and we get licensed. And then year or two into that, we started doing the Pro-Am championships. So we would go to Laughlin, and we'd send people from all over the country to go there, and they'd basically battle it out. And that developed some really good drivers, had some cool stuff come through there. Like Force Wang did it. Justin Pollock came through that. Juicebox. I mean, there were so many drivers that Jeff Jones drove it. I mean, there were so many old guys back then that drove in the Pro-Am championships, and it was cool because people came from all over the country and just did a big battle championship. Then you get to like 08, 09, you had kind of like the recession, costs started cutting, so we got rid of it, and people just kind of stayed local and got their licenses regionally. I wish it had really transitioned back right after that, because I think it was good, because that way, if you had people that were like heavily stacked in one side of the country, though, all those guys would advance. But if it was just one or two light seasons or areas there, you could have people that really weren't that great who would make it up to that series. But then you had a whole other area that was heavy, but they only had one or two events happening that they gave licenses at. They couldn't always get in. Because I remember one year, I think on the East Coast, we had, I think the top 10 guys all got licenses, and we were the top 11 drivers that year. Like, I think our 11th place person was Doug Vandenbreek. But like Wilkerson, all these guys,
Mustang, yeah.
yeah, but like Wilkerson, all of them came through and just crushed it that season, and they all got their licenses. And I mean, that's another thing too. Like Wilkerson drove an FD way back in the day. I think there's so many people that I think that people drive with now that don't even realize these guys competed in FD.
Well, you also have the fact you mentioned Southeast Drift, you mentioned Club FR, stuff that doesn't exist now.
Oh, Club FR does.
Well, okay,
they still do events, and they also kind of do like a lot of their people do the final bout events. So they just kind of
they're not licensing anymore.
Oh
right?
Yeah, no, I think they quit shortly after we started doing the championships. They just stopped doing it. Daily Drifter just stopped doing events, and then you had Aaron Losey come up with Lone Star Drift and Fabricated Motorsports. Right. He took over that region from them. Just Drift was doing California also shortly after Drift Association was, and now they would do all the All-Star bashes, and now Charlie doesn't do events anymore. So you have a lot of groups that have come and gone. Like the Southeast Drift guys, they kind of split and became Myrtle Beach Drift. Then Myrtle Beach Drift split and became Catch My Drift and MB Drift. So it's like, it's kind of neat to follow how all these things play out and turn into things.
Well, before that, SC Drift also had Three Palms. And Three Palms was the only time a Mid-Atlantic region East Coast drifter could drift in the winter. Like there were no drift events between DOD and like March, April from like South Carolina to New Hampshire. Am I
we
wrong?
still usually did January and February events. They're just cold.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, that's like competition-wise, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I judged the Three Palm stuff, and that stuff was rough. It was just a lot of things that didn't really work out to make that like it could have, which is a shame because it was a lot of fun. But it'd have been nice if that had lasted longer than it did. But it was still a good time. There was a lot of good drivers that came through there and had fun. Kelsey Rongs was in it. Pat Gooden was judging with us, and we just had a blast down there.
I think one of the other things too that I noticed as well is like with it being a 24-year sport or 24/7 sport at that point, all 12 months, you had a chance to be able to compete in US Drift when they were doing 4 rounds in like the spring, summer, fall. And if you didn't make that licensing, you could just commute to Three Palms and have another chance for a license within 12 months.
Yeah, no, you could do it. But I mean, there was a couple of ringers down there. And the thing was, they were all at the same track. So we'd have to work with what we could do. And a lot of those guys were hometown people. So like Fo, I think, did well that year. Kelsey did good. I'm trying to remember who the other one was that was top 3. But yeah, they were good events.
Yeah. And OSW, what was OSW, being the home of that whole situation. And then
oh no, Three Palms happened at was it DeSoto or whatever it turned into? It wasn't at OSW.
Then when did OSW come in? Because I know that was like 14, 15 when it became super popular of like a practice track, but also then working into the FD schedule.
Events there. Like we went and did the Three Palms. They rebranded the track that was there, and I can't remember what it was before. I'm not a Florida guy, but I know I would fly into like Fort Myers, and it was a short drive to get to the track, and so it was completely different.
Interesting. I mean, yeah. We're talking about a 20+ year span in about 20 seconds. So I want to make sure our viewers kind of understand. Yeah. Like, I mean, this is we've known each other less in person and more just of name, I think. But
yeah, we've done events for quite a while though.
Yeah. No, this is year 18 for me.
Yeah. See, and we used to do after we were doing VMP, we were doing VIR, we were doing Summit Point, then we started doing Old Dominion Speedway. And we did a lot of the first drift events there. And then that's like when Dan was on here, was mentioning seeing Jet out there. So I think we had gone out to test it, and then we just started doing events there. Then after a while, we stopped doing those. And then because it was usually the only 2 dates we could really get that were big were always when the Richmond NASCAR race was happening. So we usually got like a spring date in April, and then we got like Labor Day weekend. So it was always usually maybe Memorial Day and Labor Day, but it was definitely holidays. And so it was just tough to get people to come out on those dates. But we had fun there. And then Yoshi started taking over and doing sideways events there, and then he carried it on and brought up a whole new group of drivers like Clayton that had come through and stuff like that, which was cool. So, I mean, it's just there were so many events even around here back then. Like we had friends that used to run Drift 4-on-1 for those that might remember it down in Georgia, but they had so many events for a while, and then theirs got cut. So like Sin and Sandy moved up to DC just so they could be in more drifting events. I mean, like it's cool the people you meet. I still talk to them, visit them when I go down to Georgia. So it's like it's neat the people that drifting brings into your life, and that people do these big things where they literally moved to DC because of drifting and they wanted more events. So by moving there, they could do Club Blues, they could do our events, they could do Summit events. Like it was neat.
Yeah, being able to live in the DC metro area, I think offers a lot more opportunity. And I talked about this to Dan and my last couple of guests. It's like you're spoiled for choice without understanding the hardships that some of our Midwest drifter friends have to endure, the Texas people,
Yeah.
or Utah friends, like 6 hours to go to a track day is normal for them, if not a
Yeah.
blessing.
I mean, in the beginning, the people in Atlanta were driving 6, 7 hours to come drive at VMP. I mean,
Yes.
it's just a big parking lot. And now I have people who complain driving 30 minutes to go there. It's wild how spoiled we are now. I mean, but there's so many events, and that's how things change. And the thing is, back then, 90% of them were street driving to the event.
Well, so before I get into the meat and potatoes, what I want to talk about, that's a great way to bring this up. Do you think us being spoiled for choice is a good or a bad thing with so many events happening?
I think it's still good. It's getting the word out.
Okay.
And I mean, if all these events can still continue to happen and flourish, it's good. I mean, the last thing I want is to have less drift events. I think it's good of how many there are. It used to be I would get on a plane and travel, and people were just trying to make chit chat like, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" And then I'd spend 10 minutes trying to explain drifting to them. Now I just can say drifting, like, "Oh yeah, I know what that is." Like everyone knows what it is. About a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I was grabbing a quick bite at Jersey Mike's for some Go food. I'm in line. I see the guy in front of me, and I was wearing, I think, like an FD sweatshirt or something. I had just landed off the plane, picked up food, was heading home, and he's like, he's probably in his, I don't know, mid-60s, and he starts talking to me. He's like, "Oh, you watch Former Driven?" I'm like, yeah. I kind of worked there, but yeah, I know it. And everything's like, "Oh," he's like, "You know Ryan Turk then?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, I'm following his build on the Judd Super." He's like, and he just goes into all this. And the dude was just like, "This car's amazing." So he's like, "I follow all his videos online." But that's what's neat because 10, 15, 20 years ago, even 5 maybe, that might not have happened because
No.
I'm constantly having to explain what drifting is and tell people. But now everyone kind of knows what it is. It's out in the mainstream. Every car company does it in commercials. Like you watch NASCAR, somebody starts getting sideways and loose, they'll say drifting. Like everything is just people know what the word is. They know what the sport is now, which is great. I find very few people who don't know what drifting is.
I think there was also like a parabola bell curve of large manufacturers, major manufacturers and major companies being involved in drifting. That like, the early 2000s when FD came out, like you had Dodge, you had Chevy, you had Pontiac, you had Ford. Like I mean, everyone was full in it. And then there was like in the early 10s and the teens, there was a little bit of a lull because they weren't as much in it. But I mean, I cannot watch a Toyota racing commercial without seeing Ken Gucci, Frederick Osbo, Ryan Turk, like,
Yep.
or a tire commercial. And I think that's a huge benefit. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, totally. I mean, I think it's funny when I can go to like a gas station in the middle of nowhere now and see a Vaughn poster with Monster on the wall, or I see a Chris Forsberg with Nas. Like you wouldn't see that back in the day. It's like I grew up watching. Like you'd go to one of those guys and it'd be like a pro football player, NBA or something like that. It'd be somebody famous like that. Then you might have a couple of NASCAR guys there. But now it's like here's these guys I've been hanging out with for 20 years that you get to see on this giant poster at a 7-Eleven or something. Like that's super cool and neat because those people are what those guys were 20, 30 years ago. I mean, these guys have their own Matchbox cars and stuff now. I mean, there's a Turk one up there. I've got a few others. I mean, it's wild to think what these guys have now that we didn't have back then. So anything else that gets these people out there more in the mainstream, I think is the best thing for the sport. I feel like we're probably like 70s NASCAR right now, and we're right on the edge of it turning into early 80s where you had $1 Million Bill, who was like the first $1 Million winner in NASCAR. Like I think, and that's when like they just boom, they took off. They started getting big sponsors. Everything just took off, and I think we're pretty close. I mean, they started in the 50s, and it took them 20, 30 years. We're right there now, but it's also I'd say we have a bigger fan base than they did at that time, just because of the internet and the way things spread. I mean, back then it was you watched something live, and you didn't watch it, you missed it. Now even in the 90s, you were able to record it with VCR or something. But now, like, my daughter or somebody can be like, "I want to watch drifting." And then they just search it on YouTube and boom, it's up there instantly. Not pulling out a paper and seeing what plays that day if that was going to come on TV. I have friends all the time who end up texting me, they're like in a bar and they'll be FD on TV or some type of drifting. I saw Forsberg post the other day. He's at the airport and there was Club Loose E-Town on TV at the airport bar. Like, how cool is that? You asked me 20 years ago, never would have thought that would have happened. It's just the neatest thing.
Conveyance of information now is at its own peak, and it's just going to keep getting better. I think we had our own hurdles of trying to just not only explain our sport, but be able to display what we did in a proper way when it was growing. I have my own opinion of where I think the sport got taken more seriously, but I really want to hear yours first. Where do you think drifting took a major shift in its growth to where it's like, okay, this is where like it's become recognized as a thing?
That's tough. I can't put a finger on like what moment made it happen. I mean, for me personally, I think it was like when they did the D1 in the US and like you had those guys come over and Bond competed against them. Like that was huge for me because here's the J guys coming over here. Like that's awesome. And then later you had D1 come again, like in the mid to late 2000s. And so like I helped work the event at E-Town,
Yeah.
and you had Daigo there, and you had Dan Savage and Steve Angerman competing. Like you had all these guys from back then that were able to compete against these J guys, and it was awesome. And like the D1 versus US thing was super cool because that's what we watched growing up. Like we watched VHS tapes of them and everything, the style, what they did. And think about it, they didn't have like what we have now either. Even to this day, very few of them have a garage. Like Daigo's got a killer setup where he's at, but for the most part, like talking with everybody else that's over there, most of these guys are like doing what I did in college. Like you're out in the middle of your driveway if you have one, or like I swapped a head on my Honda when I was in college out in the parking lot, and I had to send the cams off to Crower, have them reground and bring back. My car set on jack stands in my townhouse parking lot in college for like a good month, where I had to ship them off and get them back because I was too broke to just buy a new set. So I had to have them reground. Like that's what those guys in Japan have been doing for years because they just don't have the space to have a big place like we have now. And then like I see my friends who have these big pole barns they're building, and it's just I'm like, you got a full on fab shop at your house to do. And watching those guys be able to do all the cool stuff they could do then on such limited stuff is just amazing. And then to get back to your point of when I think it really took off, what I think, I don't know about drifting as a whole, but for drifting in the US, it was sometime during COVID.
Really?
Kuba came over to Irwindale, and he was watching the drifting, and I think he was interested. I don't know if he was going to come drive, but he just wanted to come watch it. So he's at Irwindale. And I heard him say to one of the other guys, like they translated or whatever later what he was saying, but it was basically like, I think they've gone past us now. I don't think we could be competitive enough with them. Like we need to make our guys better. Now, mind you, our style of drifting and judging is different than theirs, but he was there to watch it, try and learn it and see what it is. But I'm like immediately taking like, this is awesome. Like our guys are like impressing this guy who's Team Orange. Like everyone knows who you are. Like their videos are amazing. So like that was like a big thing where I'm like, man, this is actually pretty cool that like the respect is there. They see what we've done, how much we've progressed in a shorter amount of time and done it. So, I mean, like we watch our guys, they complain at drivers meeting in the pros and they're like, we can't do this. We can't do it halfway through the qualifying or practice. I mean, there's a couple guys already nailing it. By the time we get to qualifying, a bunch of the field's able to do it. Like they are some of the best drivers in the world, and it's impressive. And don't get me wrong, there's other series that have great drivers too. I just don't get to see them as much as I do these guys. I've judged, I think it's either like 100 or 102 events. Like that's a bunch. So, and you're watching practice, you're watching qualifying, then you're watching more practice, then you're watching the tandem. Like that's a lot of stuff to watch, and you see these guys. And so then you can tell when a guy's having an off weekend or he's battling his car. And then you can also tell right out of the box when a guy does 1 or 2 laps and they're just amazing right off the bat. Like Shanahan this year, rookie season. And he same with Hero. Here they are hopping onto like ovals and stuff that, as far as I know, they don't have anything like that compared to what we have. And they're just right out of the box at OSW ripping it. Go into Seattle, Irwindale, like they're just ripping it. I'm just like, these guys are just super talented. And I mean, like if they're this good now, I mean, you've got guys who've driven for years who haven't ended up on the podium as quickly as these two did. And I mean, they're talent. It's just raw and it's good, and they've got a great eye and they know how to play the game, and they can put their car where they need to, and they listen. It's just the new guys coming up, whether it's sim or just natural skill, they're a whole nother breed. So I kind of feel like we're on our 3rd generation of drivers, and these are the ones at the start of it.
So to touch on that note, I think people don't understand what Connor and Hero did this season. They came into a series, they're used to driving on the other side of the car. They have never driven American tracks at this caliber. They've never driven the cars before outside of testing. Hero jumped into a 1,300 horsepower GT86 at 14 years old.
He's been driving for a while, and both his parents drift. So I feel like he's truly like the prodigal child coming through because his parents have drifted for years and they know the sport in and out. Like that's what's kind of cool. Like he, I think, is like one of the first like 2nd generation from his family coming up through the sport, which is cool.
I was just giving him credit for coming overseas into a car he's never driven. I'm
just saying, how cool is that though? Like that's a thing that can happen.
His battle against Dean
he's 4
years
old. He's 4 years older than my daughter, and he's sitting here running like in the top 5 for the championship at the end of the season. Like, and what's even wilder is so like halfway through the season, I remember in Orlando in 23. He had asked Robbie to get him an RTR James Dean shirt because that was his favorite driver. So Robbie gets it for him, whatever. Then we go to Irwindale, and it was after the event, and he wanted to meet Dean and everything. So like Robbie introduced him and had him meet and everything. And he's like, "Oh, it was very nice." And like he was blown away that James knew who he was. So that was cool. And then here you are the next year, and they got to battle each other. I think in St. Louis.
Yep.
But yeah, so
Yeah, it
like
was
they
the
got the
finals.
manager. Like,
Yep.
how cool is that? Like, not even a full year, you're meeting your hero's meeting his hero, and then like 9 months later, he gets to drive against him, and it wasn't for like just top 32. It was like close to the finals, like semifinals, something like that. Like that's super cool, and that's amazing that is possible because I doubt there's many motorsports that you can do that.
Watching that battle and just understanding the concept behind how it came to that. St. Louis in itself in 2024 was a bar brawl of an event. I've never seen
Yeah.
so many total chassis at one event outside of Utah because
I
Utah.
don't know. Irwindale back in the day used to take some. You can go back and find a lot of good clips from there. A lot of cars flipped over, and that second inner bank or that second wall on the inner
Oh,
bank is just
after the infield.
yeah. That
Yeah.
that one has claimed a lot of cars. I mean, it does every year, but yeah, that one's tough.
Yeah. I'm gonna back up about
Sure.
84 years into this thing. I did
Yeah,
find
my bad.
No. My April 2006 drifting magazine with the way spine says spring 06. We've got a full page ad with Samuel Hubenet, Afro Kengushi, and
Oh, that looks like no. You got the GTO, so that's
no. I'm talking about the look at Ken.
okay.
Look at Ken.
Yeah,
Full
okay, I see
Mike
that.
Tyson, yeah, and so you got Reese and RSRS 2000.
That would be Pfeiffer.
Yeah, and then even G4 TV for those of y'all that remember that.
Oh, here you go. Well, then if you're gonna play that game, here you can.
I will play that game, young man.
So you know who one of the hosts was, our interviewers was on G4 TV FD, right?
I do, but I know you're going to tell people. I want to hear from you.
Oh no, they can look it up on their own. Then we'll keep it a surprise. She used to be on other TV shows, and she used to date an NFL player, so we'll leave it at that. But yeah, here you go. Look at that. I think this is the exact same thing, just on a
that
DVD.
is. Oh my goodness! Like that's we're looking at.
Look at that. Circuit City. Some of these people don't even know what Circuit City is.
Remember
here's another good one though.
Slide America Drift Bible is in that same same iteration.
Well, then here's another one. This is the 2005 season.
Don't you? I'm gonna go find my DVD book, and it's gonna be a walk down memory lane. I've got. I was talking about. I was talking about Chris Knapp on one. I had some DA videos. I've got RSR. Like we're gonna.
Oh, do you have the Big X? Big X is a good one. There's the whole reason I bought a 240 convertible. If you haven't watched that, there's a champagne one in there.
Big X, because you got me on a thing now, and I haven't dug this deep since Dan's podcast. So talk about Big X. I'm gonna go get my DVD book out of here. So tell everybody about Big X.
Yeah, so Big X was this crazy festival that Team Ward and them did in Japan, and for years I wanted to kind of replicate it. They had umbrella girls out on the track, the guys are drifting around them, and then they also had dirt bike jumps, and so they're jumping dirt bikes over the drift cars. So for years we kept trying to figure out a way to make it happen, and lo and behold, it wasn't identical, but we were able to do it. They brought in some ramps to the skid pad at VIR last year during Hyperfest, and Monster and JR and them were able to put together and have the motocross guys jumping, JR and Hobson and a couple of the guys being able to drift inside the skid pad and have dirt bikes jumping over them. So that was kind of cool to get it somewhat to what we wanted to do.
Wasn't that also kind of the premise for XDL? Not XDC, but XDL.
Yeah, and those guys came, and we worked with them when we did GT Live at VIR back in, I want to say it was 07, 08. We did 2 years of it. Yeah, GT Live was fun. And Tarzan came out 1 year, for those who remember him.
Okay, well, I want to make sure people understand. So Tarzan Yamada is one of the top touring car drivers in JGTC. He also holds a whole bunch of the world records down when they do the Sport Compact Challenge and all that, or UTCC.
Yep. And he judged an FD the first 2 seasons.
Yes, he does. And he also is a guest on a lot of the video option stuff.
Yep.
With Geechee and Arito and all those kind of guys. Corner of the not just racing world but drifting world as far as really putting style into that.
No, he was always showing. They used to use him the first couple of years at FD. They would have that Viper that he'd come out and do demos and everything in.
Oh my god,
quite the character.
Well, so that's the other thing too. Like you were talking about Japanese drivers having these fantastic facilities. One of my favorite drivers, I got his glove on the wall. Ken Nomura, Nomu Ken, owns Urus Japan, drives the Blitz ER34, which that's what we're doing with my R34 as far as style. But his shop could not be smaller but still a global operation.
Yeah, see, that space is limited over there. And
Yeah.
that's what's amazing, that these guys can do all of this that they've done for these years in such a limited capacity, where we have like these giant shops, and these guys were doing it out of like a 1-car, 2-car garage at most.
Yeah, no, and I think that goes back to the grassroots mentality, because all these drivers still are very humble. Just Japanese people in general are very, able to be respectful and understanding. So they work with what they've got. They're not greedy, but they still are able to make the most of what they have. That, I think, something we could probably learn from them. What's like one thing that you think the grassroots drifters are doing right now that, I'm not going to say gives you the ick, but you could be like, hey guys, can we just like not do this anymore and say it never happened?
Yeah, that would be I I don't want to be mean, and I get it. It's tough. I've been the same way. Um, but it's like the total mismatched cars and just spending all the money on like things that aren't important. I mean, even back in the day when I had my Corolla, I tried to make it match always with my 240. I mean, I ended up swapping it and put a Sylvia front end on and everything, and it's like, even though it didn't match right away, I still went and bought some rattle cans and made it the best I could because I couldn't afford a paint job. But it was that way. It was either that or I'm driving with the whole black front end of a car with a champagne bumper, and then the rest of the car is white. So, like, I don't know. My thing has always been, I mean, I came from mini trucks and everything. Like, I just appearance to everything. It's funny because, like, vinyl's relatively cheap. You can learn to do it yourself and do that too. So it's like, you don't always have to spend a boatload of money. You can go to Earl Schwab, you can do Mako, you could buy $60 worth of paint and spray your whole car. Like, it's not a ton of work. It's just like the lack of effort these people put in. And it's, I don't know. I just feel like it's a reflection of you. Drifting is a style sport. Like, that's why road racers and people don't always like it, because they don't get it. But like a generation that came from skateboarding, snowboarding, surfing, all these action things, like style. You wear crazy looking, like, we don't wear, like, take snowboarding. You don't wear like the same thing ski people wear. Like, we're outgoing, it's bright, it's vibrant. Surfing, like the bathing suits we wear aren't the same that like people who do swimming do. Like, it's just these skateboarders, different outfits too. Like, it's just everything has a style that's action sports related, and drifting is an action sport that's stylistic heavily. I mean, it's judged on style. So like, why would you not want your car to look good? And I get the missile car fad came through and everything. And again, that was around the time of the recession and stuff. And like, it was easier to like bang up that car for practice and still have a nice car. But see, I feel like if you didn't have a nice first car, your second car wasn't a missile, it was just a junker. Like, you got to have a really nice car, and then you could have the missile cars back up. The problem was people just thought, oh, I can just have a piece of junk car and then I can go drift and everything. And I get it. Look, hey, same reason I don't drive all the time. Like, I've had a car almost the entire time I've been in drifting, but I don't always drive it because I don't have the money. And I get it. I could probably go out there and have more time and be in an ugly car, but then I'd never get photos, videos, all that fun stuff with it too. Plus, I don't want to go out there and drive something that looks like it just went through a demolition derby. So I still have a Corolla that I've had for 4 or 5 years now that is actually just an overpriced bookshelf. I mean, there's event supplies shoved in it. There's banners on it. Like, it doubles right now as that. Because I want to drive so much, I just bought a 318 that was already caged and everything. So now I have a car that I can start driving again this year. So I'll start doing that again. But it's like, I waited until the opportunity presented itself. The car's all one color. It's good. I literally going to swap in a little bit different suspension, and then I'll have fun again. So,
is that the 318? Is that the 318 that I saw at the super secret Richmond warehouse?
Oh, probably. Yeah, it was the one. It was in Keeps. It was Paul's. It was Patrick's brother. So he had it for sale, and it was for like a full year. And he like bumped it back up on the drift classifieds, and I like was all of a sudden like, you know what? Let's see if we'll actually sell it. And hit him a message and said, hey, you still want to get rid of it? He's like, okay. And so bought it. And so
sitting amongst all the USDrift cars.
Oh, actually, you know what? It's actually that one's not there. It was there for like a day. You probably saw our old.
I saw Ben's, your old Lookout one.
That's the one that has the Coors Light logo. Yeah.
Yep. Saw that one too.
We actually have 318s.
My god.
That one doesn't have a cage, and then we have one that's a shell with a slick top in the alley. That's literally just a shell dropped on the ground, and then we have mine that's caged. So we have 3 of them though.
All right, we need to put a disclaimer here, like in some sort of a bold lettering. So I understand you guys see that Brian and all of his friends have 318 Ti's, E36s. If you're looking for a first drift car, do not buy a 318 as your first drift car.
Buy a E36 or a 350Z.
Well, but 318 is still in the E36 family, but it's like...
But it's half E30.
It is. The front end is all 30 at that point.
So it's hard when you got to find like doors and parts, but E36 are starting to get expensive too, so maybe E46 would be even easier. But 350Zs are cheap.
For how much longer? Because I know that cheap is now what, $5,000?
Yeah, but still, that's not bad. I paid that for my Corolla shell. A shell. I mean, it came
In
with a
what?
boatload
Okay.
of wheels,
In
but
what year? In what year?
I don't know, 4 years ago.
All right, that's
You know what's
actually not a
funny
bad
is I
deal.
sold my old one for about that same price. I sold my old one for that exact same price, and it was pretty much good. Had full interior, spot welded chassis. I mean, I kicked myself for ever selling that one, but that's what
I
happens.
mean, we're seeing clean S13 right-hand drives go for like 2025. We're
Oh, I know.
seeing clean 84 to 87 Corollas go for the same. Like it's
Oh,
a
it's
wild
insane.
era to start building a drift car. Like, okay,
Yeah.
you mentioned a couple of good chassis. If you could build a drift car right now or buy a sim and you are not drifting right now, what are you doing first?
I mean, I've looked at getting a sim. I don't have room in my house. It's chaos. My wife would kill me if I brought home a sim, but I would love to get one because the amount of seat time and everything I think I could get from it and the cost, it would pay for itself quickly. I mean, tires are expensive, everything. I mean, it's not going to replicate the fun you're going to have really driving because I played around with them a little bit, but not like crazy. But I'm like, I think it would be blast. I mean, all of a sudden I can't sleep. Cool, get up, hop on the rig. I could play for a little bit. I mean, same reason I wish I had a garage at the house and it wasn't 20 minutes from my house. By the time I'm motivated to drive 20 minutes, go work, then I got to drive 20 minutes back home. Where if I just want to go outside, work on the car, and then come back in, I could do it in 5 minutes. I could do it in 2 hours. So
Right.
it's a convenience factor. So I get it. I mean, I think watching these new young kids come up from Sims, I feel like it probably doesn't teach you everything, obviously, but it teaches you enough where you probably get a head start on people. So you're not wasting a bunch of money to try and do this, figure this out. I mean, a lot of the kids don't listen to like people who give advice. Like you could have all the drivers in the world get out here and say, here, buy this, do this, get this, do this. And they give them the plan. They're still going to do their own thing because that's what people do. They want to be unique and do it. So they don't follow the rules. Like back when we did it, we're overinflating tires, underinflating, removing sway bars, doing that. Like it was all trial and error because there was no record of anything. I mean, for one, Chelsea gives everyone the recipe. He doesn't care. Like people nowadays like hide their specs. They don't want to share. He's like, you can copy it all you want, but you still got to drive better than me. So it's like, it's not a competitive advantage is how he looks at it because he's that competitive. He knows he's that good, which is amazing. But yeah, there's all these other teams that don't share any information, but there's so much out there now. So many people driving, drifting, different chassis. Like unless you're doing a unique chassis all on your own, there's enough info out there where I think you could buy the right stuff, set it up the way you want. But if you can bypass a lot of the trial and error and just practice and put a ton of hours, what do they say? 10,000, you master something. I mean, I'm sure a lot of these kids are close to 10,000 on a sim, if not more. And I've judged a couple of sim comps. I mean, those people are insane.
Oh,
And then we did like our own street series through USDrift a couple of years ago. And I mean, we had 200 entrants and like Yoshi and a couple of the other guys got into it. And I mean, there's people I thought that were good, and these other kids came in from around the world and just spanked them. Like it's a whole nother group of people. And watching those comps, it's crazy.
so you mentioned
cool.
you mentioned two things that actually I do want to bring up just based on that. So affordability and trying to like get into drifting versus sim versus buying a car,
Yeah.
and then also gatekeeping. Excuse me. Those
Okay.
are the two things I want to talk about. Firstly, the gatekeeping. Do you feel that's more at a professional level, like FG Japan, Formula Drift, and not as much in grassroots? Or do you still think there's like grassroots people that were like, don't ask about my setup?
See, I don't know if I'd call that. I guess there are still people that compete at a grassroots level that have aspirations to go pro that probably won't share their setups. And I know there's guys in the pros that won't either. Like you can ask them questions of, and they probably kind of I mean, here's the thing: some of the drivers don't even know how or why the stuff works, but they do it great. I mean, it's almost like watching Days of Thunder, and he's like, I don't know, I can just drive fast. And I've met other people who do road racing, same thing. Guy made a living road racing. He's like, I don't know, they put me in a car and I could just do really good, so that's it. But he couldn't tell you anything about it mechanically. Like, but there's drivers like that. There's drivers who don't even know how things are judged in FD, and you'll ask them, and they're like, I don't know, my spotter takes care of that. And you know what? They're guys who finish in the top 5 and top 10, so they clearly are great. They focus on one thing, and that's driving what they're told to do, which is obviously working for them because they're doing really well. So they don't need to worry about all that little stuff. So like, I almost don't feel like it's totally them trying to not give out the information. It's just some of these people, definitely at a professional level, have so many people working on their team. They don't maybe know the answers to how things are set up. They just know this is what they give me, it works, and I give them advice and they do it. And then you have other people who take somebody like Chelsea, who's a professional, but also could probably tell you, and probably Forsberg and a few others like that too, like, that run their own programs could probably tell you every single thing they do. And I know Forsberg's helped out people with 350Zs on how to set their cars up over the years. I know Chelsea helps people with BMWs. So I feel like a lot of those guys do it. I just wonder if more of the other ones who don't, it's not so much that they're trying to hide the info. It's just that maybe they don't know it.
I mean, that's fair. Go ahead.
On a local level, though, I guess I could see where the guys don't want to share. Because think about it. Budgets are tight. Things are rough. It's you and maybe one friend. Sometimes you're by yourself. Like, you need every advantage you can get.
Yeah, I remember watching an interview with Lorette on the sidelines at FD Irwindale, Mike Medette, Taylor Hall's mechanic, and he was very articulate and explaining about, like, because Taylor was blowing supercharger belts, and it was a thing all season, and he was very articulate, very able to explain why and the why we're doing this, and he did this in a less than 2-minute interview while they were changing up for the run, and it was just, I think, refreshing to just have somebody go as far as, like, hey, we've been having this problem. This is why it's happening. This is that. Yeah. And being able to have that availability or visibility and openness is nice. And not just we don't know what we're doing. We're going to fix the problem. We're going to wish it's good. We're going to have a lot of fun. And, like, all right, bro, like, cool story.
Yeah. But then also it could be that the problem was somebody forgot to tighten a lug nut or something dumb and they don't want to throw their teammate under the bus. So they're just like, oh, we're going to fix the problem. Like, yeah, I mean, it could be a million things, and it's tough. But, yeah, you don't want to throw a team member under the bus.
Absolutely not. No, again, it was just nice to be able to see that because that was one of the first
that they were able to do that and everything.
And, I mean, you see every interview, obviously, on the back end because you're busy running around carrying all the hats that you do during an event. But, no, on the back end of that, I wanted to talk about the affordability of getting into the sport at the grassroots, not just choosing the simmer stuff. We're in 2025. A 20-year-old chassis was made in 2005.
Yeah.
So these S13s, these 86s, E30s, C36s, like, some of this stuff is really just getting harder to find, but it has a really great backing. And there's a lot of stuff that people are trying to jump into, like New Age Mustangs, C5, C6s, E92s, FRS BRZ. As far as the stuff getting newer and more expensive, do you think that's hurting the grassroots drifters trying to get into it? Or do you think it's maybe getting them a better ability to, learn?
I don't know if it's that much. I guess if I still see where people get bargains on cars and get deals. I think you just got to be good to look for. I mean, yeah, we were buying $400, $500, $800 Corollas back then, and you could, if you wanted to, you could part it out and make your money back, even on that cheap, like pretty easily. Like you could pull a dash and sell it for $100 something, and then you pull LSD, it was like $300. Like we'd buy cars and we're like, oh, if it doesn't work, we can still part it out and we get our money back. Like it was pretty much like just buying a junkyard thing. It didn't matter, and I think you can almost get away with that nowadays with certain cars too. But I think, I mean, my most expensive drift car, like I went through two Corollas, and one was 400, one was 1200. Then I bought the 240. That was like 2300. Like it was just, you could buy cars cheap. But then you think about 15, 20 years ago, you double that now. That's not far off from what it is. I mean, I think you can get things so much easier. And it's funny because, like, I feel like suspension isn't that much more than it was back then. Wheels, a little bit more than what they were. But, I mean, we were also going and grabbing dumpster tires. Like, it was tough. But you also had a Zennies back in the day, which is where Falcon got huge, because you could buy, for a 15-inch wheel, or 14 we're using on Corollas, you could buy them for, like, $50 a tire, which was awesome. So, like, you'd put those on the fronts, and we just go get a bunch of scrubs, and then we just get them mounted. But we were going through dumpsters at tire places like Costco, Sam's Club, and we were just pulling from their bin. Oh, we got two tires that are the same size, same brand. Cool, let's pull them. And we would just always show up with used tires. But we also didn't have the horsepower people have now. So I think the other problem is everyone wants more horsepower. Like,
no, you don't need it.
You don't. I mean, it just makes your sport that much more expensive. Things are more likely to break because they're not built for it. You've got to reinforce stuff. If your car's 20 years old, you might as well go ahead and replace all the bushings and everything on your car because just things are going to fail. So it's like you're just adding expense. Whereas you can take a stock E36 or like we take the 318s, we throw a little bit bigger motor in it. But it's like you don't have to go overboard and turbo it or supercharge it or throw a V8 in it. Like you don't need all that power because that's just going to put more stress on the car and it's going to cost you more in tires. I think starting out, these guys can take a stock vehicle, do a basic suspension upgrade, either weld or do an LSD, and then from there you keep adding on to it to see what you need next. But I think that's you could get in pretty cheap and have fun. Like you don't have to go over the top. And again, there's so many events like we let you drive without a cage. So like depending on the track, you can do that. So it's not like you have to buy a cage right away. We do want you to be safe, and that is a huge thing to have because cars can get crashed, they can flip over, and everything. people get bigger and bigger engines, more and more horsepower, then obviously the speeds increase and the accidents and the chance of getting hurt increase with all that. So just all that power just makes everything cost exponentially more. So keep it simple. Buy a stock Z, have fun in it. Buy a stock E36, E46, have fun in it. Like, get used to it, get the basics. I think that's the other thing. Like, when a lot of the old guys started out, a lot used Miatas, a lot used Corollas, a lot used 240s, and then some would swap in or make them like a log manifold for the K or whatever. Like, but it wasn't like we had this like instant 400 horsepower right off the bat and we're learning. Like, they all learned with like low horsepower, so you just drove faster to make up for it. And then once you hopped in one of those cars, it was easy. Like Dan Savage, start out in a Miata.
Yeah. No, and I think the other thing too, back to when you were talking about the availability about events, you also have to like buy a car that's like geared and set up for the events that are near you. Like,
yeah.
Like if let's say you're in Richmond, let's say RIR, VMP, and Langley are like the 3 closest tracks to you. They're all short courses.
Well, VMP could be really long, and we could also make VMP really fast. VMP is different because you can make it anything you want. But yeah, Richmond's kind of short, and then it's just Langley, you can go fast on the bank, but then it drops into the infield where they get slow again. So yeah, it's all 3 I think are different, but you do need to set your carb I think for each one because, and that's what's talking about VMP. We don't really release a schedule. We just have a big parking lot. We can make it what we want. So we try to do it in the middle. We try to make one section that's fast. We try to make another section that's tight and technical and slow. But because the parking lot's so big, I mean, like, your tires are melting by the time you're at the end of the track because it's such a big course.
Yeah, no, I you're right. I want to take that back. VMP can be a 200 horsepower or a 700 horsepower course.
Yeah,
Plus, I mean,
I think when it was, I'm just trying to think. I think it was either Austin Meeks or maybe it was Zach Zeller that brought out. I think actually both Cadillacs had been to that track, but I think when they were running, like, they were going through a set of tires in one run, like literally from one end of the parking lot to the other, because those cars just had so much horsepower.
Like, Christian Nelson went to go tuning or testing his Z. What was that? Early 23, I think, when it was like completely fenderless and stuff like that. Right before he went to Battle of the Bay. That so I mean, he took a car out there was 6.8 liter, and
he was burning through
big
tires
shot
too.
on. Yeah. Done. But at the same time, you could take a 318 out there and have all the fun in the world.
Yeah, and we have plenty of guys who come out there with low horsepower cars and they're out there on the same set of tires the entire event. And so it depends on what you want to do. But everyone who wants to just immediately throw horsepower at it, I think you're doing a disservice to yourself and you're just spending way more money than you need to.
No, yeah, absolutely. The one thing I'm noticing with a lot of organizations is they're offering like clinic days or school days. Is this something that you guys have done in the past that you don't do anymore?
We used to do USDrift 101, and it was like classroom session we do. And then we also, way back then, used to do like a spotters class to help people out with competitions and stuff. So we've done it. So many people do it now. It's like we don't want to have to like compete with it. We had I brought Chelsea in. We had him come to Langley one time, and we had him teach a class. Not opposed to it. I've talked with Reese before if he wants to come down and do it. It's just, if I have enough people ask about it, then I'm happy to do it. That way they don't have to drive up to him. We can just pay him to come down. And then it also depends if we have cars to use. If I can build another 318 or something like that, and then we have a couple cars that people can play with, that'll be cool. But yeah, I mean, doing the classroom or even the one-on-one type stuff, I could probably do it pretty easily at VMP for people if they want to do it. And we could get Reese or Dan or somebody to come down and teach classes. That's possible. It's just, there's so much on our plate, and it's like, Reese does such a good job with his school and Chelsea does his schools. It's like, I can just send people to both of those guys and they'll probably do a better job because they do it like all the time now. Like, Reese just has a crazy curriculum, and anytime someone messages the website, I'm like, we could do it, but I would just fly into Philadelphia and then I'd rent a car and go him, and then you can rent car, tires, all that stuff from Reese. And he's just got, I mean, like, that's what he does. So he has it set up for it.
So if we want to talk objectively, then we can, come out of this. Would you see more value in someone using a 101 day, like a learning day, versus like a VMP open day to trying to learning the car, feel the car? Like, what do you think is a better value?
It depends on the person, because like we started out doing autocross and stuff. So like when we started doing our first couple of events, a lot of our courses were autocross, just a little bit looser. Like, we had really tight 180 turns. Like, I wish I could find some footage of them, but like they were really long in a really tiny area, but they were all like second gear, real slow, just to teach people technique and how to flick your car and transition back and forth. And we do that kind of now with some of our courses where we'll add a really difficult section where it offsets the weight and you switch it back and then do it again. And you can tell the drivers who like get frustrated and then they just zip right through it, or they just link it as one big turn because they don't want to work. it comes down to personal preference. Some people are lazy and they don't want to learn and get better. Other people are like, hey, watch my run. Should I go wide here or go narrow? Do I run the inside? Do I run the out? Like, they want to know where to put their car and have the most fun. I mean, if it's a practice day, I say use as much of the track as you can. Like, make it big, huge transitions, flicks, everything's fun. But you have these other guys who just want to apex every turn. I'm like, you're leaving so much track on the table. Like, you could have made that turn way bigger, had more fun with it, but these guys just want to zip through it. So I think it comes down to what they know. So if someone has some basic car control and stuff, I feel like they could probably jump into a regular event and learn it and pick it up pretty quick. But if you have no experience whatsoever, I think going to a class probably would be a good thing for you, because you get the basics. You kind of learn why when you do this, this is what happens. Or when this is what you're facing, do this to accommodate it and it'll fix it. So I think having like that kind of thing is good. But if you've already got some basic car skill or you've come from another motorsport, then I feel like you could grasp it pretty easy. And then there's always exceptions to the rule. We've watched kids who come out, I can't think of her name, but there's a girl who comes out sometimes to like the Langley events and everything, and she rips. And it was like her second event when I saw her one time. I'm like, wow, she like picked it up instantly and just, she's good. Like, it just
What was
happens.
she driving?
Miata.
Oh, like a purple Miata?
I think so. It was last
yeah.
year or the year before. Like, but yeah, but I mean, like, that's what happens every time
Yeah.
you get someone random. We're not saying random, but just someone that I'm unfamiliar with who comes out there,
Yeah.
and then you like find out after like one or two events, like that's all they've driven. And you're like, wow, that's impressive. Like, you're good. You understand how this works, whether it's because you actually understand or just you naturally can feel what the car is doing and you can adjust for it and adapt, which is great, because there's still other people who've come for years and you try to give advice or try to help them set this up and they're just constantly fighting it and it never clicks. It's like me. I can't play musical instruments. I wish I could, but I've tried. I suck at it, tone deaf, whatever. Like, but that's me. I'm what some of those people are for that. Like, I just can't make it click no matter how much someone tells me or hear what to look for. I can't play the guitar or doing it. Like, it just doesn't work for me.
It boils down to the fundamentals, whether they're natural or they're learned. What do you think are some of the advantages that new drivers or new drifters are getting nowadays versus when we started? What are some of the advantages they have that we didn't when it comes to getting into the sport and being possibly a help on their learning curve?
Yeah, I think, like I touched on earlier, like, just there's so much information out there now. Like, we used to have to like go on torrent sites and buy DVDs and stuff to watch drifting just to see it. Like, there's so much drifting you can watch now. I mean, you could watch a little private one day event. You could go watch professionals, like all that stuff. Back when we did it, there really wasn't. There was D1 was like the only professional thing. So like that's what we watched. Or then you just watch some of the videos they had, or you watched the legal stuff that was out there, and that's what you had, or you went to it and watched it live. Like, we don't have anywhere near the amount that you can find now, which is so helpful, because like we had the Drift Bible DVD, like you had stuff like that you could watch, but now there's just so much information there. Like, you can literally message these drivers, like the professional guys, and they'll usually reply to you. Most of them run their own accounts. Or you can go meet them at an event and then be like, hey, I have the same car. Like, let's say you were at Hyperfest, you talked to Vaughn. You're like, I have a Mustang. I want to know how to make it drive better. And he'll be like, have you done this? Have you set this up? Or you talk to Forsberg about a Z, or you talk to Chelsea about a BMW, or even a Mustang. And these guys will give you that advice. Like, I think that's what's nice, is you've got this now history of knowledge that people can pull from and get and have. Whereas earlier it was just trial and error. Let's do this. Let's try this. Let's overinflate this. Let's do stiff suspension. Let's do soft suspension. Like, you just had to do it to see what happened. And I think these guys now, you've got kind of a playbook, so you can just jump into it and kind of, you got a head start. That's how I look at it. And I think that's also why so many young kids now are doing so well. Also, like, parents are able to get more into sport. Like, trying to go back, imagine 20 years ago, and tell your parents, hey, I don't want to go to college. I want to be a professional drift driver, and this is what I want to do. And they'd be like, what's professional drifting? But like, now you're like, watch this on TV. Look at it. These guys are making a career. I want to do this. And then you can actually do it now. Like, it's totally different.
Running that fine line of content creator, drifter, that was never an opportunity we ever had. You either had to come from money or be disgustingly good and come from money just to be able to get in front of the, whatever camera that was going on.
Yeah, I don't even know if you really had to come from money, because you still, like, in the early days, I think, like, it was, even though you could have, like, you had to be good at getting sputter, like, even Hubernet, even though he had, like, the Viper and stuff, it wasn't like he had tons of money. He went, and him and, like, two other guys, I can't remember if it was Henry and Rich Rutherford, but, like, there was three of them, they had rented a car, and they were sharing it for that D1 event to qualify in. Like, these guys were struggling just like everyone else. JR was driving cross country, like, Forsberg was sleeping in a garage. Like, these guys all put in sacrifice. It's not like they all had money. They just, got lucky at the right time, right place, or made the right deal, figured out how to make it work, and they all made it happen, which is great. But there's also a ton of guys who used to drive an FD who don't anymore or gave up after a year or two. So like, I think there's just lots of things at play, and it all works out. Well, you could have all the money in the world, but you're eventually, if you aren't putting results out or you aren't getting the views or any of that type of stuff, eventually you're just throwing money away and you're going to pull out. And there's drivers that may have had money and been well off and didn't need to do that, and then they just left, or they might still do it too. So there is a lot of it in there. Yeah, it's just.
Well, no, it took me a bit to like do the background on how much you had, you know, as far as like when you started judging FD, when you started with FD. I was definitely having a little bit of issue trying to find like exact years. But when did you officially start judging for FD or becoming officially involved with them?
Well, I guess in the beginning, so like I gave them that film of the event and everything, and then I stayed in touch with them for a while. Like I said, Jerry was driving an FD in the beginning, so it was like Matt and Nate Braz, and so like we would go to events. Like I would shoot events, so I have like old photos where like I had a media pass at FD in like 04, 05, and maybe it was 03. Anyway, in the first couple of years, I was there shooting like the East Coast events, and I would get a media pass and go hang out and take pictures. But like we were also giving input. So like originally, like at Road Atlanta, they were going to run the loop the way we don't run it now, or no, the way we run it now. They were going to run that first year, and we were like, hey, like after talking with the drivers who drove it, like it's going to be a struggle for a lot of those cars to make it all the way up the hill and do the loop the way we run it now, where you're close to the bridge entering the keyhole. So like they already made a graphic and everything. We reached out and we're like, hey, you might want to switch it and make it so it's quicker to get in the keyhole and then have that whole long stretch downhill.
And then come back down, yeah.
And so they switched it at the last minute, ran it that way, and it worked for a while. But even then, like you're watching like Pfeiffer in the Viper battle, like it's just getting left behind, which stinks. But it was just there was such a discrepancy in power back then. So we always stayed in touch with them. Then like we ran like the idea of Pro-Am behind them. Then we later ran the idea of Pro 2, which later became Pro Spec. So like I've always been working with them and try to feed drivers up and talk to them. So it's always been like ever since day one, I guess, behind the scenes I've been working with them and doing stuff. But like officially like getting a paycheck or something was 2012 when I came a judge, and been there ever since. So that's kind of when that started. But all along the road, like we were in the background doing stuff with them, whether it was shooting media or just talking with them saying, hey, this is what we noticed. What about this? Or, hey, we want to help get you drivers to the series. How can we do that? Or we want to run this championship in Pro-Am at Laughlin, Nevada. Like we want to do this. Help us. And they've always been good working with us. Like, and the funny thing is, like a lot of the key people are still there. Like Sage, Olfer, Andy Luck, they're all Cassie. Like they've all been there from like the beginning. So it's easy to get along and work with everyone because it's pretty much the same team since day one.
And I think that's probably, I mean, obviously it's hard to like go back to the roots of NASCAR, roots of NHRA, IMSA, all that kind of stuff. But to have so many originators still being a part of the organization kind of shows that the passion is there, not just for the money, and to show that sport growth is primary goal.
Yeah, no, and it is. And I think that's what's cool. And like you were saying about trying to be like, what does it help to be a driver? I mean, that's the dilemma nowadays. Like a lot of these kids coming up have to be able to do marketing stuff. And I think that's where kind of like my similarity earlier when I said like late 70s, early 80s NASCAR, like that's when NASCAR took off, when they started doing more branding. And it wasn't like mom and pop's race shop on the side of the car. Like you literally have a big name sponsor on the side or hood of your car. And I think that's where drifting is getting right now, where these guys are like making deals where you can have a career and still not have to put up results. Where like before, it was like you kind of had to do both. And if you just did all of one and not the other, you still didn't really kind of last because you had to have performance to keep in the series. Where now I think you could still do pretty good and have a really good partner. Like Kenny Wallace in NASCAR, I'm pretty sure, somebody might pull me out wrong, but I'm pretty sure, I don't think he ever won a race, but he ran forever and then he became an announcer. But he was a character. He was fun, but he managed to sell his character as a driver, and he kept the entire NASCAR career for a couple of decades. So like, how cool is that you got to do your sport, whether or not you won or not, you were still there and able to make it happen. I think these guys, and I told drivers when we were sending them up, like, hey, you got to come up with something fun. You got to have a good gimmick, whatever. Like it stinks, but that's what you got to do. You got to be out. You could be the best driver out there, but if you're just a wet rag and not fun to talk to, and you're not outgoing or presentable or approachable for spectators or your potential customers for your partners, like you're doing no good. You can win all you want, but then you don't have sponsors to help pay for it. And then what are you going to do? You have to either pay for it yourself or you have to bow out. And so that's where I think like the guys who really do a good job figure out how to make the marketing work, and then they can just focus on the other stuff too. And it's tough in the beginning because you're paying for it out of pocket or you're putting a lot of time in. I mean, some of these guys do their own videos I know, like, from what I've heard, LZ is the one who runs his social media, even though and will respond to everyone. Larry Chen for photo, same thing. Like, they all still do that, put the time and effort in, but look how it's paid off for them by doing it.
Larry Chen answered a DM that I sent him last week while he was in Japan for TAS. Like, just the fact that he respectfully answered and we had a 2-message conversation. Utmost respect for that man.
That guy hustles so much, like, and that's why it's kind of funny. Like, he's kind of in the same boat as some of the drivers, where like people are like, "Oh, Larry's so lucky." Like, Larry has worked his butt off. I've shared a room with him when we've done FD events. Like, that man works so much. Like, it's amazing that he gets what he gets done, but he is like a vampire. He must never sleep because he's just always working, always traveling. But he is the nicest person, but he literally put in his time. Like, he used to be a paparazzi photographer and take pictures of paparazzi. Like, he's done it all, but like, he put in the time, it paid off. And yeah, someone else can put in the same time and it not pay off. Like, timing is part of it, right place, right time, but also the dedication and the sacrifice that you put in. And I think some people, even as a driver, are like, "Oh, I put in a year and it didn't pay off, so like I'm out," and they give up, or it just doesn't work their way. Like, it just can't happen that way. And I mean, James Dean came into FD really young, got beat, left, comes back 7 years later and dominates everyone. And that's the same thing I tell the people. Like, they're always wanting to rush to get into FD, and I'm like, you don't need to rush. Get all your ducks in a row, get everything figured out, have spare parts for everything, do it all, and then go when you're prepared. Trying to just, I have enough money to do 3 years of FD. Okay, cool. But you're on such a shoestring budget, those 3 years are going to be a waste. Why not just take that whole budget, delay it 3 years, build up your program, take that 1 year, and then kind of put it into that then, if that's what's going to make it better for you. Because if you're just struggling to get by and you're not really thinking it out, I feel like you're just throwing money away.
No, and you mentioned a lot of things that really, I want to talk about this now. So you're talking about image, personability, marketability, preparedness, mental just awareness. That defines the USDrift scouting report. Would you not? Would you say so?
Yeah.
Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so we've done all sorts of things. We've done the 4 and 5 event series. We've done the shootouts. We've done just when we did the licensing events, and then the scouting report. So that was kind of like, we don't want to put everything you do onto just one event, so we'll kind of watch you the whole year. So we'll actually be opening ours up probably next week, and it'll stay open for about maybe a month. And then what it is we kind of have this list of drivers, and we have a panel. It's me, Reese, Dan Savage, Mike Steiner, Ben, and we just try to watch these drivers. Obviously, if you drive at the events we're at, it's way easier for us to see you firsthand. Reese kind of covers the Club Loose events. Dan covers Summit Point, and then me, Mike, and Ben are usually at all of our events. And then I try to still keep an eye. Like, I usually pay attention to most people around the country just because I want to see what's happening, who's coming up, how things are going, and what people are doing. So I try to somewhat stay familiar with those people too, but we kind of watch everything. It's like you said, kind of a package thing. Like, we want you to look kind of professional, because if you want to go to FD and represent, like, we've had a long list of awesome drivers that come through our series, and we want to keep that going. We want you to be able to be good and stuff, so we try to help. Like, if it is a competition we're doing or one that we're at, I'll try even, like, I've cut back my work schedule from like the Ferrari events for next year, so I'm not doing those at the moment. I've got a lot on my plate, so I'm trying to stay home as much as possible to get that stuff off the ground and make it work. But my goal was to kind of go to some of these other comps that are in the region or in the area and kind of root for our guys and go there and kind of like just give out pointers and kind of help them out along the way. Maybe not be able to crew for them or spot the whole season, but if I can go to a round and kind of keep an eye and help these guys, I'd love for our guys to go to other regions and kick some people's butts. It's always fun to watch. It's kind of like a proud dad moment or something to watch drivers come up your series and then go somewhere else and kick people's butts. So I'll try and do a little bit of that this year. So if my schedule permits, I'm going to try and travel to a few more events outside of our own events. But it's good to watch the drivers, the ones who sign up for our scouting report. It's free. But we pick one person, although the first year wasn't really pleased with everyone, so we didn't pick anyone. So
nothing for you.
And that was the way it used to be when we did licenses for a whole 6 event series. I mean, hey, we would do 4, 5, 6 event rounds, and we would tell people, hey, we also used to make people mad because we let pros compete. Like, back, even at ODS, JR competed for like a year or two in the Mustang. And like, finally, he's like, I can't do it anymore. But like, that's how you got better. You drove against people better than you. So like, after Dan and Jeff Stoneback got licensed, they still competed and people get upset. But I'm like, they push you to be better. And so like, after them, you had Squirt, you had Reese. Like, we still had good drivers coming up after them, which was great. And they pushed them. Like, Reese is a perfect example. I think the year that he really pushed it was like 2012, 2013. I think it was Dan,
Dan Savage.
Dan, Stoneback, and Squirt, I think, were top 3. Reese was 4th that season. And he was begging us, like, oh, give me a license. Let me get into FD. Like, I want to do it. I'm like, no, dude. Like, it'll ruin you. You'll waste money. Like, if you can't beat these guys here and they're going to be running next year, how are you going to beat them and all the other guys in the series? I'm like, now, given Dan and Jeff were really, I mean, Squirt's good too, but those two guys finished, like, really good. Dan won a season and everything. And, like, Stoneback was right there with him. Like, they were solid dudes. And so that was a tough year. Had Reese really pushed the next year, maybe he probably would have won it and done all that. But we kept those guys in there too. And we said, hey, if they finish first and second again, they're eating up the first 2 licenses. That means we're only giving out third because you still didn't beat them and they can't win something they already have. But like we didn't do it. Or if nobody deserved one that year, we just wouldn't give out a license because we just wanted people to be able to go there and not throw away a bunch of money. Because I've watched other drivers go and just dump thousands upon thousands of dollars into the sport and to pay for a team and travel. Like, that's the biggest thing. I think if anybody wants to run in FD, eventually that's your end goal. Plenty of teams will take help, I'm sure. Go say, hey, I see you're running FD. Can I come crew? I'll do whatever. Like, go there. They'll get you a free ticket probably into the event. They'll feed you. Hopefully they'll house you. And then, luckily for guys in our region, we have A-Town and we have Atlanta. So we have 2 close events, and you can go there and see what it is back in. Because going there when I watch rookies come up for some of these other chapters or regions around the country, and then on the autograph day, they're just sitting there with a marker and they have nothing to sign because they didn't think to bring hero cards or something to give away. So then they're signing other people's stuff. And it's just super embarrassing. I'm like, oh, that poor guy didn't know. Like, because they probably never came and saw how the autograph session works. Like, there's just so many things I think that people don't pay attention to like really learn. And what's cool is like Savage worked for Chelsea in advance, so he like crewed for him. Like other drivers have gone in the past and crewed for other drivers. Like you learn so much stuff you think you would know, but then you just see it behind the scenes firsthand. And there's probably stuff that I still don't see walking through the pits that these teams go through. And I'm like, man, because I try to watch. Same with spotters. When I'm in a spotter stand, I watch what the spotters taking notes, see who does what, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of neat. Never thought of that. Or they're taking times, or like it's just interesting to see how everyone does their own thing.
I think it's really cool, especially now the sports is progressing and, you know, people have graduated out or, you know, are coming in. Like, so Dan was, you know, good friends with Austin while it was going, but, you know, Dan didn't run when Austin was running, and Dan was cool friends with Jeff Stoneback. But now there was a point where Austin was running Pro 1, Dan was his spotter. And there was a point, for those of you who don't know, Reese was Chelsea's spotter. And I believe there's, you know, a spot with a new driver in FD where a former FD champion could be a part of that team. I don't want to put any spoilers, but
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Again, we'll leave the press releases to the good people that can do that. But I think that we're also in a different mode because $100,000 championships is mind-boggling. $50,000 championships is mind-boggling. I was very close. I went to 2 rounds of CMD, one as a helper in the booth and one as a competitor. And Taylor Hall was a competitor. One event in his C6 practice car, one event in his comp car. And to your point, if you are not able to go up against these people and be effective and truly be either a disruptor or a challenging force, what makes you think you're able to just go and drop, I hate to say it, $70,000+ overall for 4 rounds?
Yeah.
Just to even get to the show and actually think you're going to make a difference.
And one of the people who was on our list last year, probably, if they do it again this year, would probably get it because they probably will learn a lot this year. But they also gave a challenge to, I think, Taylor at one of those rounds as well. And so I think there's definitely drivers who are coming up doing, and they're checking out the box and doing things right. And I think they're setting themselves up for success. And I mean, that's what we want to see. We want them to be able to last and not get burned out or just blow through everything, just trying to rush it. There's no rush. Like, especially with the newer guys now, they're still young. But I mean, you still have older guys who are coming into the sport. I mean, there's still guys who start competing in FD in their late 30s. So it's like,
Rudy Hansen's 43 this year?
Yeah, or
44.
I don't know. He's up there. I think he's actually probably even more than that because I mean, it's totally doable. See, there's you can do it. There's no restriction so far in our sport for it. I mean, NASCAR guys are older too sometimes, but like younger guys just come in. But like you don't have to rush to be the first. I mean, especially now, if you're not younger than the chance to start as early as Hero, or now the youngest Sorensen, like there's an even younger one that's coming through, Cameron. Like
13, I think.
What's the rush now? Stay an extra year, get even better, and then come in. Like, unless you think you're just that great off the bat, why not go for it? Fine, but I think take your time, get everything done. Don't jump in with a new setup. I think that's one of the big things that kill people is they take their Pro-Am car, then they build it up the next season and go into Pro Spec. I think if they just stuck with the same setup that first year in Pro Spec, they'd probably do better. Because honestly, if you watch it, Pro Spec is really more about reliability and consistency. And a lot of the drivers either have reliability issues or they're not consistent because they're driving a car they're not familiar with and they can't afford to drive it outside of FD. So if you come in there with your car, even if it's underpowered, I think you can still do a pretty good job of competing in it and not having to go over the top and build a whole new thing or completely tear it down and build a whole new car. But if that's what you want to do, then take the next year and learn how to drive it so that when you get there, you're not learning while you're at the track at FD where it costs a lot of money.
I think the financial commitment has really kind of grown in my perspective of knowing guys who have gotten their licenses, who have been genuinely looking at programs. I'm not going to name names because I think they're still good drivers, but they don't need to get put on blast. I know you know some of the guys that I've come up with, and like, if you think $40,000 is going to make you competitive for your program in Prospect, you are never going to see a podium. I'm sorry. The financial commitment on top of the team commitment is equally important. What's your thoughts on that?
No, I think that's probably pretty fair. I mean, there are definitely guys who've been able to run even in pro on a budget, but I mean, at some point, you're asking a lot from your team to like make sacrifice on their end, whether they get paid or you're all crashing one hotel. Like, there's a lot of things you're doing, and it's like that. Also, I think I haven't been in a situation, but if that was me, I mean, we've done other events where like when we ran them, we'd pile into a hotel room or whatever. Like, it's not as nice as when you can just share with like one person or two people or three people versus like 8 people crammed into a room. Like at Hyperfest, we cram like 12 into a room just because that's what we have to do to make it work, and that's how it goes. So everybody's got like air mattresses set up everywhere and stuff like that. But like that happens, and that's how you keep costs down. And so I get it. But yeah, it's never as fun as where I can do an event where I can sleep in my own bed or sleep in a hotel room and just have one other roommate. Like those are obviously going to be a little better. You sleep better. You're not racing to worry about who's going to get the shower, all that stuff. Like I think when you're trying to operate a team on a really tight budget and then something breaks and you don't have a spare, like that's just got to be the biggest letdown because it happens with just simple parts sometimes. And if you don't have that, like you just spent what 10, 20 grand to get to that round, and then a $400 part breaks, you don't have a spare. Now you've wasted everyone's time. Like, what did you learn? That you should have bought more spares. So take that extra year to save that money and have spares or spares of spares of spares. Like key things, transmission, diffs, axles, like control arms, things that are going to get broken. Like you need to have plenty of spares of or some way to where you have like someone else that's running the same car, same setup that maybe you can borrow a part off of. So like if you're out there in the only chassis, good luck finding a spare because nobody's going to have one. And then your weekend's done. Like that's got to be the worst. And just stupid stuff breaks because that's drifting. But
well, on top of that, optics is just as important as anything. And I mean, the scouting report teaches people to be aware of that. But I know about the Discord. I know about how people talk in some of those drivers' meetings. People know a lot more about your program than you think. And everybody talks. Everybody's homies with the homies. Like, it's just like, you cramming 8 dudes into a hotel room to make your, like, with social media 2025, you're not just yourself anymore. You have sponsors. You have a program, and some people may or may not want to be associated with somebody who acts like a grassroots drifter on the national scale. Do you see any of that on your end when it comes to, because you also wear the 4th hat of the judge of like the corraller. I call him the cat herder. Do you see some of that, and maybe are you aware?
Yeah, we see teams like that, and then you kind of like when they have issues and they're struggling, like you feel bad for them because like you get it. Not everyone's gonna have like a huge partner that can afford to pay for all that stuff, and everybody's been there though. Like for the most part, all those teams have been at that level you are. But again, that's where like, was it the right decision to jump in earlier? Or should you have waited an extra year, saved a few extra bucks, and then done it? Like that's the tough thing. There's another driver that used to drive in pro that went and did pro spec. And I'd been trying to get him to do it for a while. And I was like, hey, why don't you do it? He's like, I only got enough money to do like one more year in pro. And I'm like, how much money is that roughly, ballpark? Could you do, I don't know, 2 seasons of pro spec because it's half as many rounds? Could you do maybe 3? Yeah, probably. I'm like, so why don't you do that instead? Like, you're trying to compete on this really tight budget against teams that have crew members of like double digits, sometimes more than 20. Like they've just got the ability to do everything. Like their car could literally catch on fire and they'll have it back on track the next day. It could roll over and it'll be back on track before the event's over. Like that's what you're going up against. Could you do something remotely similar to that? No. Okay. So it's really tough for you to be able to win. Like you need to have everything aligned to make it work basically. But if you were in pro spec, could you be a little bit more competitive? Could you have these things? Oh yeah, I could probably make it work. So go do it. They do it at the end of the year. They're like, this is the most. They didn't win or anything, but they're like, this is the most fun I've had. Like it wasn't stressed, money wasn't tight. Like it was great. I would do it. Have fun. Like see. So you just got to find a happy balance. The problem is too many people look at pro spec as being less than pro, but I think it's just angled that way. Honestly, I think it's the same. You've got a spec set of rules. The driving's the same, judging's the same, everything. Like it, I think all it's going to take is for a couple more pro, like top level pro guys to compete in it. Maybe like I don't know, maybe next year, the year after, if JR is still doing off road stuff and has a schedule, maybe he's like, oh, I could just compete in pro spec, run a spec RTR, it's the same week as whatever, and I could win the championship or not have to do like the full season. But it's a spec car, so like I think it's still great. I just think people look at it as lesser. And maybe if it was on its own weekend, it might give it a different connotation. I don't know, but it's still exciting driving. The chance for it to be all those things, it's just not there yet. And obviously, look, it's still in its infancy compared to like pro. So I don't know, give it a few more years. Maybe take old FD cars and put more of them in pro spec and make it more of like a vintage type style. I don't know, but it's just there's two different prices for both of those series. Oh, tire. I mean, that's a limiting thing too. So yeah,
and then people think, oh, it's only on a 255. TLO was knocking on the door of 800 horsepower on a 255.
Yeah, and I think Stuckey was running. That's how like a lot of them were running still the pro spec tire in pro.
Hansen was running double duty. He just had the black wheels for the 255. Dmitry Prusky running double duty. So in this, and like he had a separate car, but it's still just to be able to show this is still a bruiser brawler series.
Oh yeah.
It's just that tire is the equalizer. Like OSW in the wet is the equalizer. I think this tire is that kind of common factor they have to share. So I've been thinking, especially now that Clutch Kickers is coming back, they've got their 100K payout. CMD is going strong again next year with their 50K. I know there's events on the West Coast. I'm not as familiar with them, but would you, as someone who's like seeing some of these guys who are knocking on the pro spec door trying to find that grassroots thing, wouldn't you think that this would be like a training camp to run these events?
No, it should be. Like, I even think like the Gamblers are a great one. There's a lot of good drivers who drive in those events. And I mean, those things are tough. I mean, I think that would be a good one to do. Just because one, you're getting to drive an FD course too. So you're getting a little bit of extra value there because you're getting seat time at an actual FD track. All the other ones, like you could do OSW, I guess, too, but like Long Beach, you're not driving. Seattle, if you lived out there, you could drive Seattle. Utah is very rare, I think, where they do the full course there. St. Louis, you're not running that track. So it's like, I feel like for the guys, especially since E-Town's on a pro spec round, that's a solid one to go to because you're getting valuable seat time against top drivers on an actual FD track. But yeah, I mean, I think seat time is still key. I think if you can go around, like, so the year that Stonebeck went into FD, he won, he either won, or maybe he won our season that year. And then
I believe he did. He won at least two events that year.
I know he won our season one year, and then he won Midwest Drift Union Series, and then he went to Texas, and then he won that round that he went and did Lone Star. Like, I think it was at Texas. Like, Jeff was just unbeatable that year. He was like Magic Mike most years that he runs in other series. Like, he comes in and dominates.
2015, something like that, or 14.
Maybe it was 2012 or 2013. But yeah, I mean, like Stonebeck was on fire that year. He was just crushing everybody. But that's when you can like make the jump. It was the same like if you go back to XDC days. Chelsea dominated that, and then he's like, okay, cool, I'm gonna go do FD. And then he's like, I think his goal was he had to finish the top 16. His rookie year he finished 17th. He's like, you know what, it's only one off, okay, I'll stay. And look at him. Then you had Forrest come in after him because Forrest had already driven FD in the 2000s.
Forrest was in XDC as well.
Yeah, so he did FD in the 2000s. Then I think he lost his license, moved back to Hawaii, whatever. Then came back. He ran XDC. I think as Chelsea was leaving, and so he ran that for a year or two, and he won it. I think his year's there, and then he went to FD, and I think he finished 17th his year back. So like, I mean, like, but they were winning almost every round. But like, think about it: you're dominating everyone else there, and then when you go there, you're still really not struggling, but you're still doing good if you're fitting mid pack with FD your rookie year coming in or whatever. So it's good. But like these guys who barely get in their feeder series or whatever to get there, and then they're still struggling. Like, I think they just got there a little bit too early. And maybe reflecting back on it, oh, I probably should have stayed in the. It's like being in the minors and get caught up to majors. Maybe I should have stayed in minors a little bit longer. And people get deregulated and go back and forth. I feel like kind of like what Dean did. Dean came in, left FD, came back 7 years later. Like, you can do it. It's not a big thing. You don't have to constantly keep going and getting beat down. Like, take a year off, take 2 years off, build your program back up. practice. I mean, Hanadale, look how good Hanadale was, right?
Alec is, oh my God.
So you want to put this in more perspective? When I would talk to, I think, his dad, it'd be like, hey, y'all should build a demo car, drive more. He was only driving at FD rounds. There was no practice because he didn't have another car. It was just his comp car. They didn't get the 350Z until like clutch kickers. So it's like, can you imagine how good he'd be? Like he was finishing top 10 with just driving FD rounds. Imagine if he drove other events with a backup car. Because like the thing I tell people is look at the top 10 drivers in FD every season. How much are they driving every weekend? Whether it's drifting or some other type of discipline that's motorsport related, they're almost always driving something. It could be a demo, it could be other drift events. Like they're all driving. Like every single weekend they're posting they're driving around the clock, around the year. Like they're just always driving. And then here you are driving 8 times a year and expecting to win, but like he was actually doing it. Like he was the anomaly. Like he was a top 10 driver driving only 8 times a year. No practice, nothing, just in the car, FD rounds, that's it. So had he practiced a little bit more, easily probably could have been a champion, definitely top 3 driver. Like he was just good. And he's been posting on videos again recently, so I'm hoping he's getting the itch and wants to come back.
I saw him posting some stuff on his Facebook when he was doing this jet ski thing, and you could tell like he's just really trying to find his niche. And now he started posting more drifting videos like last couple months, and I'm like, bro, like him, Dean Carney, a couple of the Hoonigan guys, their cars are in Forza Horizon. Like you want to talk about impactful people? The Black Magic car was, I mean, with that roof scoop, so like 2000s Fast and Furious vibes, Dean, Samuel Hubenet Viper vibes, like that car was impactful. So when it comes to the profitability, there is none. I mean, these guys are they're funding everything. Yes, sponsors help. They're paying into it. On the other side of this thing, you run events, you rent tracks, you run things. I really don't think people understand how much, not just time, but money needs to be put into certain things to make it what it is. Like, for example, I know how much Summit Maine costs for 1 day, 8 hours. It's 5 figures. VIR Patriot course, I believe it's almost equal, if not a little bit more. I haven't.
It's between like I think this year when I got a quote it was like 9,500 to 10,000. Yeah, and I mean it adds up.
No EMS, no wrecker, no.
No, I think you might get both those in there, and then you got to buy corner workers through them, and then you still have to pay for your insurance. I mean, it gets to be an expensive event really quickly, and that's why like when people complain about Hyperfest, I'm like, yo, you're creating a drive here for 2 straight days. Includes admission to Hyperfest for you and a crew member. Right there's a bunch of money, and you get camping out of it. I'm like, you're almost driving for free when you count the admission ticket and the camping. Like, it's the best deal you can get, and people still get upset about the price. And I'm like, you have no idea like what it costs to just do this on our own. That's why we can't do it. I've been talking with Joe from CMD, and he wanted to do another VR event since we haven't done one in probably 4 or 5 years together. But that's the problem. It's just so expensive to try and make it work that it's really tough to do it outside. I mean, it's the same reason we don't go back to Summit. Like when they started holding their own events, their price was so cheap that for us to be able to do that event, we had to rent it. Then we had to make sure we had enough people to cover that. I have to pay people to travel there. We have to either camp out, which many years when we did the comps, we were camping in tents at the track too. Like workers, like our staff was just all camping out. Like we couldn't afford a hotel room or anything. Because like by the time you pay for all that stuff to make it happen, and then insurance, it's like you're still struggling to make it work. Whereas if it's the track, if they don't have anybody that rents it, what's their only cost? Their insurance is for the year. They've got to pay for some staff. So like they ran a comp once on Maine there in the last year or two that had 4 drivers. So when they asked about, oh, do you want to come back and do events here? I'm like, if you can rent me the track for the price that it costs for your 4 entries, I will do events there every time you have an open date because I will gladly pay it. Like that's easy, but I can't afford it because they priced out competition. That's why I mean, aside from like Club FR doing an event there every once in a while for Final Bout, like it's priced so that it's restrictive for anyone else. But if they raise their price to make it more lucrative for people like me and other organizers to come in, then their drivers have to pay more. So honestly, their drivers have a really sweet deal right now. It's priced lower than I can afford to rent it and do events. It's priced cheaper than anybody else can do the same. So they were actually getting a really good deal. And I hope their drivers recognize that and appreciate it because that's why nobody else holds events there. It's not that they don't want us to come there. They want us to. It's we can't afford to because the price they charge those guys is so cheap. I couldn't match it and make the event work.
Yeah, and I mean, drifters, obviously, we shoestring budget everything. I don't care what our builds are.
I do the same.
And I think some people coming into the sport, they start seeing some of these prices like over $100 for like, for example, for a VMP day. And it's like, well, but it's just a parking lot. and I'm only getting to drive for 7.5. Like all this like negativity. It's like, okay, what's your alternative? Come try to drive this lot on an off day. Get
Yeah.
arrested or get fined. Try to street drift.
And the nice thing about VMP though is you could bring your right hand drive car or your super nice car that you never want to wreck, and there's like 3 light poles, and if you manage to hit one of them, you are definitely like that's the one track that I know of anywhere that anybody can go on for the most part, and it's 500,000 square feet, and you really have to mess up to hit something. I think in all the years we've done it, only 2 people, and mind you, they're both Miatas, have hit something. One Miata way back in the day, I won't name them, hit a trash can barrel, like a 55-gallon drum, barely dented the fender, and then another one hit a little fence pole, but a couple years back. But aside from that, nothing has been hit there other than like other cars bumping each other and everything. Like it's a wide open parking lot. It's the safest place to drive your nice car that you want to learn how to drift on and not risk tearing it up.
Well, yeah. Last year,
go ahead.
there was last year there was an event. I know you remember it because we had to go move the mountain. There was a Mustang, that really great driver, happenstance. A tire went loose and wheel went off of the car and rolled for approximately 1/8 of a mile before a fence on the other side of the property got it. There's no way that would ever happen at any other event.
No, I mean, that place is just massive. The only downfall is we can only do drifting in their off season, which is the cold months, so December through March. That's why
you were talking about Richmond though.
Oh yeah, like VP, but that was that one. But yeah, Richmond.
Yeah.
Richmond's a little bit different. There's obviously lots of walls to hit there. You can break your car and do that. So it's ideally not a good beginner track to learn on. But again, that one's expensive. That one, by the time you rent all the stuff and make it happen, it's pretty close to what it costs to rent VIR. The beauty is it's local to me. So me and my staff don't have to buy hotel rooms. We can eat at home, whatever. Like the costs to like put the event on are still cheaper, but the event is still expensive because you're in a big city and everything. The nice part about that is you actually get spectators that help offset that cost. But to literally put the event on, it's very, very close to VIR. And that's what's we joke about sometimes. We're like, we could just go rent VIR, but then we got to drive 2.5 hours. We got to get hotels. We got to cook food or buy food. And like the costs just go up to make the event cost more, which makes it unfeasible. But like, at least at Richmond, even though it's more expensive, it's the convenience factor, which makes it nice.
In the late teens and early 2000s, there was another organization that did run events at RIR, but the last 2 years, obviously USDrift has really been impactful. There's been other events there. I know Clean Culture did drifting component there as like a car show drift thing. The amount of spectators and just people who had never seen drifting before blew me away. Whether it was announcing the street legal events or doing that Clean Culture. Do you think events like that, because Richmond Raceway is in a city center and these people being a part of these events, do you think they're getting the best version of grassroots drifting to like say, hey, this is something I want to get more interested in? How do you think that's contributing to the overall idea of grassroots drifting in the public?
I think it is there because definitely Sean and John have helped out with doing some of the lighting and stuff for the night events we do there, and that definitely adds to the atmosphere. I think having people like that want to help out and make the events better is huge. We've done events like the hard part thing is like when we were doing events at VMP for all these years, like that one's just, it's such a big open parking lot. It's hard to make it look cool or exciting. Like that track at Richmond we can do because we can put the flags on the front wall. There's the Jersey Bears. We can have fans get close. Like at VMP, you have to sit back so far. Like you're away from the action. Like everyone wants to be up close and see it and hear it. So like that allows you to do it pretty easily. It's the same with like Langley Speedway. You can get right up there with the bleachers, the grandstands. You can walk the pits. Like you're close to the action. And that one is also in the city. So like you look at all these other tracks like Summit Point, Englishtown, VIR, Road Atlanta. Like they're all away from like a city center. Whereas Langley and Richmond are both actually in a pretty urban, like it's in the city limits. It's right there, like minutes away from people, which is good because you could throw an even better event somewhere else, but like to get people to want to drive more than 15 minutes as a spectator or something like that, it's tough. I mean, you get drivers who live in Richmond who won't drive to VMP, but they'll come to every Richmond one because they don't want to drive 40 minutes to VMP. Like it's tough because time is money and people like you wake up extra early to get there, then drive, then you got to drive home. Like I get it. The people who drive 2-3 hours to come to events, like trust me, we see it. Like we appreciate it because it's a lot of work and we've been there. We used to drive 6 and 7. So we get it too as ourselves, but that's also why like, even if it's a little bit more to do that local event, it just makes things easier. But having the spectators come in helps amp the drivers up. Like they like that crowd. Like a lot of the guys came by like, oh, so cool. I was like slapping hands of little kids on the fence line. Like they love that stuff. So like, not only do the fans like it, the drivers like it too, which is cool.
Well, you've got the ride along contingent that you do. You have the waivers, you have the wristbands, you have the thing. But the nice thing is that every US Drift that I know of, correct me if I'm wrong, as long as you've got a license and you're over 18, you can get a helmet and a ride along band for free. Am I right?
Yeah, we don't charge for it because we do it Hyperfest just because that event costs a lot. There's a lot of liability on the line. The insurance is extra expensive for that event. So like that one again though, we also bought like 60 helmets last year that were new because the old ones are bad. So like we take some of that money and we just end up putting it back into the event anyway and make it nicer. But like even us, we have our own probably 20 or 30 helmets that we loan out for free. People give a license and then they can go. And if the drivers want to charge for rides, I don't care. I don't want to take money from them. I don't want to be like, here, we're making $20 off everybody and throwing them in your car. Like, we don't charge for it. Like, if they want to be ambassadors of the sport and give people a ride for free, cool. If they don't want to and they just want to practice, that's cool. If they want to charge, help offset their tire expense, that's cool too. Like, I'm up for whatever makes people happy. If they don't want to give rides, they don't have. It's not like we forced them to do it. I mean, we could come up with a way that they wanted to make money and do it. I'm sure we could all talk and get with the drivers and come up with an idea too. It's just, I just want to help promote the sport, get more people to like it. We're one of the few sports where people can get into a car. I mean, it's amazing when you talk to friends who aren't into motorsports. They've never seen a race car. They've never sat in a car with a cage. So if we're able to give people this chance to be able to do that, it probably makes their week. I have friends who aren't into cars that I'll bring out to an event, throw them in a car, and they're like, they'll talk about it for like years. Like, oh, I remember when I went in the ride, that was the coolest thing ever. Because we're so immune to it and it's like any other day. It's like when people see FD drivers and they're like super excited. I see the long lines for the autographs. I'm like, that's crazy. Like, I just can't buy, like, that's just XYZ. Like, I've known them forever. Like, they're just regular Joe Smo. But these people are stoked to go see them. Like, they've traveled hours to come watch. Like, that's awesome. It'd be like if I went to another sport or something and wanted to see a celebrity or something. Like, but that's cool, and that's where our sport is. And any way that can help people enjoy that more, get access to it, it's great. Because that's the thing, like, when you talk with the insurance companies and everything, like, we're the only sport that really does a lot of ride-alongs. Like, yeah, some of the road racing groups do rides here and there and stuff, but, like, it's so much into our culture that that's what people expect. They don't expect to go for rides at autocrosses. They don't expect to do it at a road race. Like, they don't expect to do it at a drag race. But drifting, people just assume, oh, you can go for rides and enjoy it too. It's like a roller coaster. And that's what's cool. Again, our sport is different than a lot of the other motorsports.
A roller coaster is probably the best way to define what I want to talk about next. So,
all right.
Obviously, drifting started in Japan, driving on mountain roads. And that was the originator. I mean, there was some JGTCC guys that did some stuff that, oh, that's drifting on a track. But grassroots drifters in Japan started on the mountain Touge.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to bring up what you were able to be a part of starting in 2023. The shirt you're obviously wearing, Drift Appalachia.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk about the idea of where this idea, because it's not just you, there's multiple organizations that work with this. I think people are really curious to see how this A was an idea, B, how the heck did you get it to go, and C, what can we expect from this
twist.
event?
It's plot twist. It's all illegal still. No, I'm just kidding. So if you go back really far, let's see, maybe 10 years ago, 9-10, state of Georgia, senator, somebody was trying to pass a law to shut down public roads to do motorsports on. It got shot down. Somebody relayed that information to another guy who's a senator in West Virginia named Mark Maynard, and he's like, oh, and he's big into cars, super nice guy, and he's like, I'm into cars. This would be great for my state. Let's figure out why they're built it and pass. We'll make ours better, and we'll get ours passed. And he did it. And then me and Chris from Hyperfest were at SEMA probably 8 years ago. Met him, had lunch.
Chris Cabetto, correct?
Yes, Chris from NASA Mid-Atlantic and Hyperfest. So we were out there at SEMA, and somehow Mark had gotten a hold of us, so we met up with him and chat briefly. He's like, hey, I passed this bill, or it's getting ready to pass. We're going to be able to shut down roads. Mining's on its way out here. We're trying to bring back the economic impact into our state, development, all this stuff. And we're like, oh, that's really cool. Let us know how we can help. We'd be interested in stuff. And I think at the time they were kind of looking at like drag racing and stuff like that. And like, it never even dawned on me, which I feel like if there's one thing I regret, it's like the fact that I could have done this 6 years earlier than we did. It's like, it just even dawned that they would let us do it. Cause it's like, it's been so instilled in my head that drifting has to be like on a racetrack and everything now. And then like, fast forward 6 years, so like 2022, and Derek King, who used to drive in tons of events back in the day, he's worked with Drift Indy. He drives in like Grid Life, does time attack hill climbs. Like Derek just does everything, and he's got some amazing cars. If you know him or see his stuff online, like
OG team breaking.
yeah, see, there we
Oh
go.
my
Yeah, but
goodness.
I mean, he's
I
he's
love
got
Derek.
he's got like an Integra. He's got old FB, FCFD RX-7s. He had a Corolla. Like Derek is just everything. So
Yeah.
and he's also very opinionated, which is awesome because he'll just tell you
Yes,
the truth.
he
And be
is.
like, this is how it is, and your car's ugly, or you're not driving fast enough. Like he'll just no sugarcoating with Derek. Plus, Derek likes cats, so that's cool too. So yeah, so Derek's doing like a hill climb or something, and then he meets these guys, and he's like, "Hey, y'all shut down these roads to do the hill climbs or anything. Do you think we could do it for drifting?" And they're like, "Yeah, I don't see why not." He's like, "Okay, cool. Let me talk to my boys. I'll get back to you." So he hits up Eggert at Drift Indy, and then Eggert hits me up and goes, "Do you think we can do this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's start diving into this more and start meeting with these guys and talk to them." So we start doing it. Next thing you know, they're working with Mark in West Virginia, and it's like everybody knows everybody all of a sudden now. We're like one big group. We're like, we can make this happen. We're like, what do we have to do? So we come up with all these things like emergency action plans and permits, and it's like it takes months to make this stuff happen because government does not work fast. So like if we have an event taking place in say what are we in January now, so we have our event in April, we've already been working on things for several months. Like it's just so many different arms of government that you have to deal with, transportation, local city, counties, whatever. Like it's cool. In West Virginia we can shut down pretty much every state road. In Kentucky I think we can shut down any road. Like I think I could honestly shut down an interstate if I wanted to. It's awesome. So yeah, so it's great. We've got an awesome relationship with these guys. And the best part is we're all having fun doing this, but we're also providing a positive impact. We donate to charities when we're in town. The last one we did, we donated equipment or money for equipment for a school that had gotten flooded. Uh, Other ones we've done, each town we go to, we try to pick some type of charity or something to give back to them. In addition to that, we're coming in and bringing, and the funny thing is we've only done one spectator event, but we bring in drivers, media, staff, crew. We bring in a couple hundred people. We're there for a couple of days. We spend a bunch of money. We like to party. So this town's getting an influx of money. Like the last one we did in Kentucky, the subway that was right by the track we were using, they ran out of bread the first day, had a sign on the door said we're out of bread. Like we just cleaned them out. Like they weren't expecting us. The other one we came into, the guy was like, none of the restaurants were open after 9, and all the people were hungry and want drink. And so the sheriff / judge of that town said, if you guys come back again, give me a heads up. I'll make sure they stay open. If they don't, I'll get the fire department to cook food and feed y'all, and I'll get them to buy a bunch of beer and liquor, and y'all can just hang out. Like they all love us coming in. Same one that happened in Kentucky. We talked to them later, and we did a drive-in movie theater type event, and we did like a car show, and hot rods came out, drift cars are there. We're playing one of the old Drift Alliance videos on the TV or the giant movie theater screen because it was a drive-in movie theater. And then the drivers are doing burnouts when they're leaving. So this lady that was by called the police station and goes, they're doing burnouts of it. And the person at 911 dispatch goes, yeah, we know. It's our officers asking them to do it. It's okay. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. Click. Like, that's the thing. Like, we go in, we were in West Virginia, and we were doing the first block party one. And I mean, they couldn't handle it. I felt so bad for that wait staff. And I've never worked in a restaurant, but I've dated plenty of waitresses. I have friends who are in restaurant business, cooks, owners, whatever. And I know the struggle those people go through. So like we tipped them well, we felt bad for them, but we gave them a heads up and said we're going to bring a crowd. They didn't believe us. The next time they gave us 2 blocks, brought in food trucks, had extra vendors. They were ready for us. But that first time we walk out the bar, we like talked to the cop that was there. We're like, hey, can we walk around and look at the cars with the beer in our hand? He's like, or with a drink in our hand. What's the open carry all? He's like, what are you drinking? We're like, beer. He's like, you can't get drunk on beer. Does a 180 and just walks away from us. Didn't even care. Like they love us coming in. We're not disrupted. We still get to have fun, but we're spending money there. They're making money. Their people are doing well. Like it's a win-win for everyone. And it's great because the charities, the environment, like we're introducing people there. Some of the drivers stay late. They go tour and do sightseeing. Like a couple of the drivers stayed at the last one we did and they went camping, and then they went and checked out like the New River Gorge. Like there's all sorts of sightseeing to do. So they're making it like a family trip. Like it's cool. And we have people driving from all over the country to go to these events. So you have people who've never been to the state that are now coming in and checking it out. The content we're creating is huge. So there's more awareness to this area. Like it's just great. And so hopefully, I mean, I'd love to be able to do my own state of Virginia. I'm trying really hard, but again, that would be the convenience factor for me. Instead of having to drive 10 hours to Kentucky or 7 hours to West Virginia, I could drive 2 or 3 and be in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Like that would work for me.
Country
So
roads take me
yeah,
home.
so if we could do that, but I mean, I'm open to Pennsylvania. We could do New Hampshire, Vermont. We can also do the Rockies. We could do Pacific Northwest. Like, eventually, all that's on the list to do. It's just we got plenty of time. I mean, we've been drifting for so long. We just now got this, so I feel like this is going to last for a little while. We're going to have fun with it. But to touch base on it, I know the biggest question I always get asked is, how do I get to go? How do I get invited? So back to the beginning of this conversation, we talked about style and drifting and everything. Like, think of it like this. I'll give everybody almost the cheat code, and you can choose to accept it or you could ignore it. We're not gatekeeping. We're not trying to do any of that. Like, we have this rare opportunity to shut down public roads legally and do drifting. And even like I have drivers from Japan who want to come do it. Like, people want to come do this, and the ability to do it legally is just what's so cool. At the same time, we don't want demolition derby looking vehicles out there because the amount of views we get, the stuff we do for that state, we want it to look really nice. It doesn't have to be professional drift cars, but we want it to still look good and show that we're not just a bunch of idiots out there just tearing up the roads and causing a ruckus. Like, so we want things to look nice. Kind of have it like you can still have tons of fun. Trust me. You can watch my videos. Like, I've had tons of fun there. Sometimes too much fun. It happens. But like, everyone has a blast. So we want your car to be stylish, look cool, be fun, whatever. Like, just be good looking. I mean, it could still be plain. It doesn't have to have a huge livery on it. We've had like solid black cars. JLo's RX-7 was there. That thing's clean, not stickered up. Like, it's just a good looking car. Like, think
The Meyer brothers, they're one color cars.
Yeah. So just think late. Kenrick's car could look a little bit cooler, and he'll probably get mad at me on this, but he could do a better. He could do a better version of Arrow, but we keep busting his balls. But anyway, sometimes a little consider, and like Kylie's car is the exception. Yeah, we don't want a bunch of multicolored cars out there, but Kylie's car fits that persona. I mean, his car just works, so that's what makes it cool. He could paint it all one color, fine, but it's kind of cool the way it looks, and so we're not totally bound by this, but we if you show up in a 240 that looks like Kylie's car, it's not the same thing. Like, that's what we're trying to get at. So just have a presentable car, make it look nice, and then it's kind of like it also boils down to trust me, there are a ton of really nice cars out there, but the people aren't so much nice. So like, they haven't been invited, and they get upset, and they're kind of mad. Like, we want people that are going to promote the sport, do a good job. Like, we go into towns and the mayors come out and they talk to us, and like, everyone we brought so far, we've never had an issue. Everyone does a really good job. Everyone's considerate. I mean, we get to drive some of these cars, like Turk's truck, clearly not street legal, but they'll give us a police escort and let you drive. So if you have a drift car that's not street legal and you come to one of these events, we can shut down the roads from where we're staying and to where we're going, and we'll get a police escort and you can drive your illegal car on the street. Like, right there, that in itself, some of the guys are stoked just to be able to do that. So that's cool. But again, it's like, you got to be something positive for the sport, because we're going out there, we're meeting with kids, parents, adults, whatever. Like, we're trying to promote this sport to these people and show that we're not a bunch of idiots out there just messing around, tearing up the roads. Because we are giving them a slight inconvenience if they live on that road, because we're tearing up the road in front of their house, leaving skid marks, and then if we have to shut down in front of, like, we can literally shut down a road in front of someone's house, and they got to wait until we can let them go in and out of their house, which has got to be an inconvenience. But we're also helping their community and everything, so it works out good. But we want people who are also going to be positive and nice and polite and all that stuff. So just carry a good image of drifting, and then understand also it is quite dangerous. We have had 2 cars flip, a couple others wreck, like, and you
A
could be the
couple
best.
others wreck? A couple others wreck?
That's a couple.
But
But here's the thing: mistakes happen. Everyone's not perfect. I mean, look at Dan. Dan's a pretty solid driver. Rarely makes a mistake, and it happens. Like, it's just the ditches are deep. The mountain doesn't move. Like, it's just it's a whole different beast. And you'll have drivers who go out there, and I'm not gonna play West because I haven't driven it. I've gone for rides, and it's wild. But even they've gone out and they can tell it's over their level, and they'll just park it, and they're totally content with that, because it's not for the faint of heart. It is a sketchy thing, and you are just ripping. And when we have a bunch of cars out there, you make a mistake. It's not like on a parking lot racetrack or something where you can go in the grass and go around them, or go in the asphalt and go around them. Like, you've got a guardrail. Some places we don't, but most time you have a guardrail, and then you have a mountain. And the mountain ain't moving, and you don't want the guardrail to move, because then you're going down the hill. So, like, you make a mistake, and then you're going to choke up everybody behind you, and they're probably going to hit you. They're not going to be happy. And sometimes things like that happen, but it's like, we want people who are going to be really consistent. So, I mean, if you can drive a course like that and not make mistakes, or at least think you won't make mistakes, they can still happen, but you got to be good. And some of the guys who have wrecked, like we were just joking a minute ago, they were actually wrecked to avoid hitting someone. So like,
Correct.
uh,
Yes.
Cash with the Fox Body Mustang in
Uh-huh.
Kentucky, like his like went deep into the ditch, whatever. But that was to avoid hitting someone. Like these guys are sacrificing their cars to avoid hitting someone, making it worse. So we need to make sure that we
Right.
have people who are going to make the right decision in a split second. Like, boom, do I hit that car or do I crash my own car? I think that happened to Sergey as well. I think,
Mhm.
and it stinks because he was avoiding an accident, messed up his car, and he had like every spare part but one, and that's what ruined his weekend because they were ready to put their car back together. But a lot of guys, I think even Zach had the same thing. Like he would to avoid something and wreck. So it's like these guys are wrecking because of someone else who made a spin or a mistake, and they don't want to wreck. So we just have a really high standard. We're not trying to be mean. We're not gatekeeping. It's just there's a lot on the line, and this isn't going anywhere. Like we're not going to screw this up. If it gets screwed up, I hope it's not from us, and if it's someone else or whatever. But honestly, I hope it doesn't get screwed up at all, and we can keep doing this for another 20 years, and then everyone will get their chance. It's really tough. We're under a magnifying glass right now, and we're trying to make sure because it's still new to us. I mean, we've only done 5 stages so far. So like, I mean, think about fifth drift event back in that'd be 2002 of like our official drift events, 2002 maybe 2001. Like we've done probably 400 plus. I don't know now. Like it's just there's so many events. Like we're still learning this thing. We're still making improvements. No event has been flawless so far, even on our backside. Like we keep after the event, we're like debrief. Oh, we need to make this better. Let's do this. Let's do that. Like it just keeps getting better. But trust me, it's not going anywhere. But if you can check those 3 boxes of a good stylish car, great personality, and you can drive well, then fine. And trust me, we're all watching the videos. Like there's a whole panel of people that pick. It's not like it's just one person saying yes, no, yes, no. Like there's a panel of us, and the applications come in, and we go through them and read them and review, and we do like group talk and whatever, and people can pitch for someone and everything else. But at the same time, we're also drifting fans. We're watching videos. That's kind of like why I said I keep an eye on what else is going around the country, because we'll see someone who's just awesome, and then maybe we'll be like, let's tap them. And the funny thing is, half the people that are rippers don't even know it, and you'll ask them, and they'll be like, "Really? Oh, I didn't know I was that good." But they are, and they don't really like. That's just humbling. Like, don't be cocky and be like, "Oh, I deserve to be there. I'm the greatest." Blah blah blah. Like, we don't want you to wreck. One, we don't want you getting hurt. Two, if you damage stuff, then you've got to pay for it. And I've had the price list because that was part of it. Was I need a menu of what it costs for a guardrail, what it costs to repaint the road, what it costs to clean it. Like, what's a street sign cost? Because all those things can and will get broken. So it's like there's expenses to it. We don't want you hurt. We don't want your car messed up. We want you to be able to come back to other events. And we also want to keep doing this for other people. We don't want to throw an event where someone gets badly injured or wrecks a ton of stuff, and then they're like, oh, this is done. You can't do it anymore. Because then that ruins it for everyone.
No,
So
the biggest thing, there's a couple of things you didn't touch on that I really want to make sure people understand. So you did 5 events. I was at the PRI USDrift press conference.
Yep.
I believe $3 million of influx into the local economies over 5 events.
Yes.
So the West Virginia and Kentucky towns in just 2.5 days each event. So in 12 days, we put $3 million into these towns.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You want to talk about median household income in the 40s for some of these places.
Yeah.
And to be able to see that, plus the optics. If you are not aware of what Drift Appalachia is, I don't think you've ever watched a reel about drifting on social media in the last 6 to 8 months. It's everywhere, and it's giving opportunities for a lot of these local rippers you were talking about to be able to get national and international coverage.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't had that many YouTube guys. We haven't had that many pro guys come out. I mean, I'd say 90% of the drivers are just regular guys. A few ex-pros, but for the most part, it's just regular dudes coming out. And a lot of them are guys, we've been trying to tap old guys to get them to come back out too. Like, D'Alessio came out, which was cool. I mean, Wilkerson's back into drifting again now. Like, that's awesome. Like, but that's the neat thing too, is like, I don't know how it was for you, but when I got into drifting, I was a broke high school, college kid. Like, just, it sucked. Like, you're just broke. And that's how most of my friends always were. And that's how I feel like most drifters are, because that's about the age you get into it, and then you just make poor life decisions and you pay for them the rest of your life. But what's nice now is a lot of our drivers who did stop for a little while got their life straight, got a career, good paying job, a family, kids are older now. Now, it's funny, that first year of Drift Appalachia, our average age group was 18, 32, 35. The second year, it shifted like 10 years older. So it's like all these old guys started realizing, hey, I still have my car. I keep like it's renewed drifting for them, which is the coolest thing. So like I've now got all these older guys like in their late 30s, early 40s who are getting back into drifting, rebuilding the cars. Like they now have money to do it. Like it's so much easier and they can do it the right way. And that's the big thing. So it's interesting how this has shifted to more of the older people because that's what we grew up watching. And the fact that we can now do it is the coolest thing. Because like you asked me 20 years, never in my wildest dreams would I think we could legally shut down a mountain road and do this on it. Ugh. I'm so mad we wasted 6 years not doing this sooner.
Well, but no, I will say you were putting your time and efforts into other things to be able to help grow the US Drift brand. It wouldn't be what it is today.
This would have been amazing.
Hindsight's going to be 2020. There's no doubt about it.
I know, but man, I just wasted 6 years and we could have been doing this.
So what is one thing then, now we're in 2025, what is one thing that you want to see the sport doing better or just doing period to help make its image better and then grow in a positive direction?
Stop sharing photos of cars, unless it's like a really, really amazing video or picture of cars with missing body panels. Like,
I see a theme here, Brian. Man, could you lay it on any thicker?
Well, it's like when you talk to people in other motorsports, they like it's just. I've always been in drifting, so it's like most of the road racing and everything were older, more elitist. Like they just had better career. Like it's just with age. Like now I'm closer to like what those guys were. Like they're just more financially, but like they always look at drifting like, oh, it's just a bunch of crash piece of junk cars. Like it sucks because that's not what all drifting is. But that's what they see because that's what most people share. Like I've seen pictures where people share, even for like flyers of an event. Like people share a flyer and then have a car, or even like a drawn graphic that has like bash bars and doesn't have like. It just looks so much better, and it just makes the sport elevate. And it's like that's the thing too. Like I try to help people like. My goal is to make drifting free for people to drive it. Like, obviously, entry fees are like the smallest thing out of the entire thing. But like, if you guys could just drive for free, I'd feel a little bit better. But like, the thing is, it's the spectators that help make the sport happen. It's the sponsors that could bring money in and help pay for this. So you it's kind of like I look at it like, and maybe you get paid to do it. I always equate it to like a band. You pay to go watch a band perform, right? The band ain't playing to perform. You guys are the performers.
No.
Ideally, in a perfect world, you're driving on track should be either free or getting paid to do it. And I feel like if people just took this more serious and like made their car look a bit more presentable so that we could get more spectators to come out and watch it and be a part of it and attach sponsor money into it, like it could eventually get there. But like it's like people just want it to stay grassroots or whatever. And that's fine. Like our off season right now, you can bring your ugliest piece of junk car as long as it passes tech and drive at VMP right now. It's off season, whatever, it's fine. But like once the season starts, like we're trying to do this switch where like we make it look prettier, more presentable, and try and get more people out there, because the second we can start getting a bigger audience, now you can start selling your own merch. We can start paying for everything ahead of time with sponsor money or spectator money. So now I don't have to charge you to drive. Then maybe if we can bring in more money, you can start getting, we can do like a stipend or something, figure out how to save money on tires and do all these different things to make it less and less expensive. Because as soon as we can get like 1,000 people to come out to a parking lot event or 2,000 to watch an event, like we can all do well, and then the rising tide lifts everyone. Like that's the goal. But if we keep having junkers out there, like, and here's the thing too, like if you have a really nice car and then a junker next to it, and your sponsor wants to use photos of you, they're not going to use any of you with that junker car in a photo. And that's what happened in FD for a while there. Like people will be like, oh, we have this brand new car, but then like somebody's driving a 30-year-old Corolla or a 30-year-old 240. Like we can't use this in a magazine ad. Like people want to see new late model stuff. Like that's a pro level, completely different than us. I'm happy to look at a 40 or 50-year-old car out there drifting. I think that's cool. But it's like, it's got to fit that motive. Kylie's car doesn't need to be perfect because it just fits what that car is. But like our cars, like the Japanese imports and all that stuff, and Mustang, make them look nice. Just, it'll help everyone. It'll help you. You'll take better care of your things. Like I personally, if I have a car and it gets a ding or a dort in it, like I'm just like, oh, this sucks. Because now everything's going to start getting messed up. Because the next time it gets a ding, I'm like, oh, whatever. It gets another one. Don't care. But that first one, it's like, oh, now it's not nice anymore. Like, and that's just your daily driver. So like if your drift car already looks like crap, you're not going to care about it. But like at least if it looks nice, you're going to try. Like I remember at and see the people who always had nice cars, even at grassroots level, had nice cars in pro. Like Forsberg always had nice cars. He didn't even do, I don't know what he does now, but he used to never do vinyl. He always did paint. Like he would paint his car. It wasn't vinyl on that car like his old original ones. They were always paint. Like that's how nice he kept his. I remember JTP had his RX-7 at one of the Pro-Am Nationals, and somebody hit it and messed up his side skirt, and I thought he was going to lose it. But like that was the thing. Like Forrest, same way. Like those guys take such pride, and all these guys look up to those guys, and they think they're awesome. But I'm like, so why don't you do the same with your cars? Like make them nice. Like you don't need to make it as nice, but just it's a 50-50 rule. 50 miles per hour, 50 feet away. Like go stand next to a 45-mile-an-hour road and look at cars go by. Like stand 50 feet away. Like that's what we want. Your car to just appear like it doesn't look like a bunch of trash. But that's why like a spray painted job can kind of fit the bill. Like we're not a car show. I get it.
Excuse me?
I mean, hey, Ryan at Langley, I think he painted that Z, the silver one, $60 in paint. That's it. That car looks fine from 50 feet, 50 miles away. Probably even a little bit closer. Like it's not hard.
I had wet paint on my Z showing up to, but hey, the rule was the one color, and you look at the photos, you would have never told that it was,
And how much did you spend?
$38 in spray paint cans. Yeah.
But like for the most people, like that looks fine. Like people don't want to pay and come look at a bunch of, unless it's a demolition derby, people don't want to come look at a bunch of demolition derby cars. And like, I just hate when people have it on like flyers and they share photos and they're like, oh, look at this, it's awesome. Like, I get it if it's competition and someone crashed and you move it up, but like, if we're just at the event, or if it breaks at the event, it's fine. But when you show up with it looking like that, I think that's the problem. Like, yeah, your car will get hit at the event. That's probably going to happen, or stuff happens. It's fine. But like when you show up that way, it's like it's never going to look better than when it comes off the trailer or pulls up the tech.
So I was thinking, just because we're talking about sport growth, awareness, and positive reinforcement, is there a possibility that USDrift could throw an event that is sole spectator focused, like ride-alongs on the flyer, bring back some drift games, something to where it's so come and experience this, but don't just watch, be a part of it? And is that maybe something that could be that equalizer to where, hey, we're going to bring 25 drivers, you're not going to pay, but it's almost like the Drift Appalachia style of, hey, we need to do this for awareness to be that next level, the stage one, so to speak. Is this something that could be on your radar?
No, we could do something. We've got some ideas lined up for this year coming up, and we'll have the schedule announced probably in the next week or two. We definitely want to try some new things and have it work, and we're still trying to make Richmond a little bit better. Trying to find money to pay for some more Jersey barriers to bring in so we can put fans on the backside and be able to have, like, you can go all the way around because we want people to be able to see it and experience it. So we're playing around with some new things, and we're hoping that it'll work for next year, or technically now this year, but always new ideas and have things going. My life's a blur. I can't keep track of what day is what. Even today, when I was 30 minutes late, I felt bad about being late for you.
Well, I hate to say it. I think you know enough about my life. I know enough about your life. If there's anyone who's on par or busier than me, you're one of the select few. So, but with that being said, I don't want to take much more of your time. Any final thoughts for the community as far as words of wisdom, just something you learned that you want to share, or just, hey, you know, that motivating thing for the guy that's got his car on jack stands since 2020?
Just have fun. I mean, at the end of the day, it's fun. And again, like, if you can't make your car look pretty, that's fine. I mean, you said it, $38, Ryan, $60. Like, it's not that hard to paint fenders and make it kind of match. And again, it's not the end of the world. We're just trying to elevate it all. The goal is to have fun. And it's funny because a lot of the people that got butthurt or upset when we kind of made that rule last year, later in the season came to us and like, oh yeah, I'm glad I did it. You made me paint my car, mate. And I like they took care of it more. They appreciated it. Like, it's just, I mean, the videos we used to watch. So here's, I think, where it really starts too, was Japan. Like, when we used to go do the FD Japan rounds, like, they would have a bumper coming loose. Like, in the US, we're like, front, even at FD, they're like, rip it off, cut the zip ties, and just yank the bumper off. In Japan, they have color matching tape to match the livery, and they would sit there and spend 5 minutes. And we're like, in the judges booth, we're like, oh my God, it's taking forever. So it's like, I get both sides, because I'm up there, I'm like, I just want to see drifting, just rip the bumper off. And here I am now saying, but I get it. When you're in an accident, fine, rip it off, whatever. But like, they'll tape it. Like, they are 100% style there. I love it. And that's why their cars always look sick. They're slams, like, probably to the point that it probably affects their driving, but it still looks cool, and that's what makes it work. And I wish more people here would do that. So I will give you one tidbit. So we are working on a surprise. So I hope it gets this. Well, it's nothing super exciting, but we're building a new tire cooling tray for cars to drive up and over. So we designed it. Ryan from Langley's building it for me. So we're trying to design it so it's super low and it'll cool the tires. But you'll basically, it's almost like driving on a tire balancer. So you can drive up, drive through a channel, cool your tires off, and then drive off. And we're making it so it'll accommodate low cars. So there's no excuse that y'all got to have your cars like 4x4s. We want them slammed and look cool. So And if you drag this device that we're going to spend a bunch of money on because your car's too low, I'm not going to complain because that's pretty damn cool. So we'll let it slide. Other than that, just have fun. Like, at the end of the day, that's all we're doing. That's all we want to do. Like, the whole reason, it's funny, I joked that this job is now my hobby, and my hobby is now watching other people, or my job is now watching other people enjoy my hobby. Like, that's the whole reason we got into this. He's like, hey, I'll teach you how to do events. And we were like, cool, we can drive more. We don't have to do it illegally. And it kind of backfired because I drive way less and we do a ton of events, but it's fun at the same time. And I mean, I'll go drive other people's this year. I won't drive my own. It'll be fun and it'll work. And that's all it is having fun doing drifting. And if you stop losing the having fun part, take a break. Don't just have a fit of rage and sell everything. I mean, look at these guys who had their cars in garages and are coming back with them and bring them. Like, just save them. You'll never get the money you put into it back. So unless you got a really good deal where someone's willing to pay for it, like, just sit on it. You'll want to drive again. I feel like almost everybody does.
Well, if you sell your car, you'll never get the money, not that, but you'll never be able to afford building another car with that mentality of what you put into the last car.
Yeah, unless you're like a really good mechanic and you can just do it yourself. But then it's still a time lost.
Yeah, time and part prices are just ridiculous. But keep drifting fun is still the hashtag that we need to keep alive. Brian, you have been an absolute fun gem, and I don't mean to swear, but good God Almighty, have I had a lot of fun, man.
No, it was good. We'll have to catch a beer.
To...
We'll have to catch a beer one night in town.
Yeah, no, and we live,
I know,
less than an hour now. We'll hang out, we'll talk more, and we get to talk about all the secrets we can't talk about on the podcast, and then I get to giggle like a schoolgirl. But no, are there any sponsors that you want to plug for not only USDrift but yourself? And then how can we follow USDrift and yourself on social media?
Yeah, always. Kenda Tire has been with us for 15 years or so they're great. They're easy to get a hold of. We also have an account, so if drivers need it, I can bring them to events for you. BC Racing, again, another solid company. Cody and them will take care of you. We have a driver support program that should be starting back up again soon, so anybody looking to get that, reach out to us and we'll hook you up with BC. And then we also have Link ECU, which is great. I mean, a lot of people, I think, wait until the end of their build to put in ECU, whereas like we go back to what you were saying earlier, you have a stock car, put it in and get that extra horsepower and do it, and then you can also update it as you do your builds.
Around it, yep.
Yeah, so don't forget that you could throw that in early and get some things fixed. There's always horsepower left on the table. And then for safety-wise, because we're pushing safety so much, especially on the mountain, OG Racing, hit those guys up. We actually have a racer support program set up with them. If you don't have it and you're one of our drivers, reach out to us and we'll get your name added to the list. It's cool. You log into their site and it'll show you the discounted price for each item, so you don't have to like harass them like we used to have to do and say, hey, what's it cost for this? What's it this? Because the discount varies based on items. But yeah. Oh, and Bride. Don't forget them. Or Brid, however you want to say it. Make everybody Breed. Yeah. So those guys are awesome as well. So if you want some authentic JDM stuff, get those seats in your car. I want a set. So hopefully that'll be on the list soon. And yeah, that's pretty much the guys that help make it happen. As for drifting, you can follow USDrift on all the socials. You can follow the guys at Drift Indy. Eggert and them are great. And then you can also follow Drift Appalachia. We have stuff on there. And then our new thing will be Touge.us, but that's not really drifting. That's more hot version type stuff. So if you're into old mountain racing with front wheel and all-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive cars, then that'll be right up your alley too.
Other than that, you can find me at Debo the Comic on all the socials. You can find us, The Dirt Drop, on YouTube. Brian, let's catch some Z's. I'll see you at the bar. Let's have a good time when we see each other. All right, man. Hey, thank you so much, guys. Have a great one.
No problem. Thank you, and good luck with the rest of the shows this season.
Appreciate it, brother. Have a good one.
Thanks.